Thank you. I'm here to talk about item number 6 on the agenda, which is the legalized marijuana dispensary presentation. First, I want to tell you a little experience that I had. Within the first probably 5 to 6 years of teaching, one night I had a knock on my door, and when I went to the door, it was one of my students. Now, I taught junior and seniors in high school, and at that time I had 2 to 3 hour blocks of time, so I got to know my students pretty well. And I could tell that she was not acting right. I didn't know for sure what it was. I had her come in, and I asked her, and she didn't respond. And I said, "Did you take something?" I knew she was probably overdosing. And I said, "I'm going to take you to the hospital." She agreed to that because she didn't want her mom and dad to know. But of course, once I got her to the hospital, they called her parents. And they came to the hospital. And they wanted to know what was going on. They had no idea that their daughter had been using. I barely knew it, but rumors get around the school, and I couldn't tell her parents what had happened. I was hoping that the doctors and the nurses could do that, but we were there for over an hour, and they just didn't understand. I could not help her, and I could not help her parents understand. So I go back a number of years, and other experiences are in between those, and so I have a preconceived notion about marijuana and other substance abuse products. Most of this I'm going to read because it's quotes. They're not my quotes. This is research quotes. So I don't want to get it wrong when I tell you what they have said in a number of cases. I will say that as we look at the issue for our community, and we know that it has been brought up that there are people that will do, no matter whether or not we legalize it and have that available in Lincoln, that they will come from other counties. They will go someplace and they will find it. If something happened to a person like it did in my situation, if we are not selling it, if we're not dispensing it, they can't blame the city. It's coming from somewhere else. It's not coming from the city of Lincoln. That's about all I'm going to say about that. The first statement is a piece of information that I actually found today, and it pertains to college students. The article is Recreational Marijuana Legalization and College Student Use, Early Evidence, and this is from an exact study that went through all of the right things that you need to do, finding all the graphs, this, that, and the other. We analyzed marijuana use by college undergraduates before and after legalization of recreational marijuana. Using survey data from the National College Health Assessment, we show that students at Washington State University experience a significant increase in marijuana use after legalization. This increase is larger than would be predicted by national trends. Now, since we know that if you're of legal age, you can use marijuana in the state. All undergraduates are not 21 years old. I know I wasn't. Second, Calhoun County Prosecuting Attorney David Gilbert from Michigan said, "It's a substance that affects your ability to do things. It affects your ability to operate a motor vehicle. Driving under the influence of marijuana has seen a big increase." Third, Colorado and Washington. Calls to poison control centers and visits to emergency rooms have risen in Colorado and Washington. They say youth are easily getting hold of edible infused concentrations such as shatter. I don't know what that is, but maybe somebody does. Although the legal age is 21, teens are still getting it. With some marijuana reproducers average 68% THC exponentially greater than the pot of the baby boomers. The Children's Hospital are treating cyclical vomiting, paranoia, psychosis, and other acute cannabis-related symptoms. And the fourth one is, this covers two areas, one dealing with the black market and the other with the criminal enforcement measures by the police. And this deals with California. Expensive regulations and high demand across the county have made the illicit trade more profitable than going legit. And cities like Los Angeles today say they are wary of using criminal enforcement measures to police the illegal markets and are unsure how to navigate this uncharted area. I would like to say that as far as medical marijuana, I'm all for it. Found this information. There are now 3 states that have a solid healthcare model with a pharmacist to dispense, said Joseph Friedman, B.S. pharmacist, founder of a medical cannabis dispensary in Illinois. Friedman is a vocal supporter of pharmacists' role in the growing industry. No mandate under Illinois medical cannabis law requires pharmacists to dispense, however. I feel that this is something that we should be looking into, something we should be concentrating on. If there is a pharmacist in Illinois that says we need to put it into where it is prescribed through a pharmacy, that's what we should be. The 3 states that he talked about having it already available through pharmacy is Connecticut, Minnesota, and New York. I'm not sure if you can gather what my feelings are, but having had personal experiences, numbers of them, I feel that I, as a person, we as a city, need to protect our youth. They're at an age sometimes, and we hear that they're at 12 and 13, they're doing drugs. They're making the wrong decision. And I don't want to be one of those, excuse me, I don't want to be one of those people that helps that happen. Thank you.
Paul? I'm an Illinois medical cannabis patient. I feel that recreational use, if there is abuse, they do it by choice. I use it medically, responsibly, very moderately. And my questions are, if a recreational dispensary comes to Lincoln, how will they service some medical patients? What products that are available at HCI in Springfield, where I'm a registered patient, what products are available there will or will not be available for me to purchase at a recreational dispensary. And on the side of every, and I just use edibles and extracts, stuff to take orally, and occasional pain creams. On every container, there's a little label barcode that shows who manufactured the product, where it was tested, what dispensary is selling it, and I get registered as the patient who purchased that item. And will that be the same in a recreational dispensary? And I know the limit is only 1 ounce a week or whatever it is. 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks in a medical dispensary, and Lord knows it'd take me 2 years for that, or the equivalent thereof in edibles. And I'd like to spend my money in Lincoln. I don't. I'm for it to come to town, so I don't have to drive to Springfield or to Canton or to Bloomington or to Normal or to Champaign or to Urbana to get the specific products I need. And so I urge y'all to bring it. It's going to be here in Illinois anyway. And so we might as well benefit. We have this Cresco Labs outside of town, and if any of you, I've driven by there a few days ago, they're quadrupling their size. And where's the squawk about that? It's outside the city limits, but Lincoln's definitely going to benefit from that vast expansion. Taxes, sales, employment. So, and I've never heard from day one much controversy about that. So inside the city limits, well, let's bring the legal, because that market is here to stay, illegal or otherwise.
Kathy Schmidt.
I have a question, sir. Alan? I have a question.
Yeah.
Then, are you for recreational as well as medical?
Not for me. I don't really have opinion one way or another. I just want to be able to purchase my product locally in town.
Kathy.
Is that medical marijuana plant that you talked about outside of town that is tripling or whatever in
Yeah.
size, is it for medical marijuana? It's medical, correct?
Yeah.
Right now, it's medical, right? Okay, thank you.
They'll be supplying the recreational market, I'm sure, too. That's not the only facility they have in Illinois.
Kevin.
As far as I know, Cresco Labs outside of town, their expansion is in anticipation for the recreational marijuana. They do grow medical grade marijuana there. It's probably that Paul purchases probably comes from there because they are in the District 9 area. And as the information I'm getting is they are expanding, and if there is a recreational dispensary here in Lincoln, quite honestly, it would come from that lab, I'm assuming. You know, whoever opens the dispensary, they have to buy from a facility like that. They're not buying it from somebody off the street and then selling it in their store. They have to buy it from a controlled state lab, just like the medical comes from.
Kathy.
Thank you. My other question is, I was curious about the taxes from that. Does that go to the county, from that medical marijuana? Is that a county?
Scondo.
Alderman Schmidt, yes,
Yes.
it's well outside the city limits, and so they do get the county the share, which they would if they were in the city limits. It's, you know, there's still a assessment portion that would go to the county, but there isn't any portion that goes to the city. The township receives some because they're in East Lincoln Township, and they're also of course within Logan County. So and the school districts that they're in would all receive.
I didn't know if it had
property
been
tax.
assessed in the city.
But it wouldn't because it's not in the city limits.
Sam.
Just for clarification, if we did open a dispensary within the city limits, the city of Lincoln would receive a tax cut, correct?
Yes, I'm glad I was going to talk about that later, but I had told you that the initial communication that we received from the municipal league before the legislation was passed in the state legislature had 5% sales tax, or included 5% sales tax that could be assessed by the city in increments of 0.5% up to a maximum of 5%. When the legislation was finalized, we received another communication later, which I was not aware of when we talked about this 2 weeks ago, and that is it's now 3%. So the legislation enables us to collect a sales tax of 3%, which can be increased in increments of 0.25% up to 3%. And then I understand part of the state, and Chief Adams talked about this, part of the proceeds from the state tax, I believe, are distributed to various law enforcement and prevention programs as well, which presumably we will receive a portion of that.
And Mr. Conzo, hadn't you said that if we did have it, that we could put more tax onto that?
No, I think that's the maximum. That's the maximum. What I had said is, and I still don't know the answer to this, but that it may be possible to assess a licensing fee for those facilities. And I'm assuming that's the case, but I don't know if that's a $25 fee or if it's a, $1,000, what the amount of that is, and I'm hoping to find that out soon.
Questions, discussion? In the back? You have the microphone.
Good afternoon.
Can you go ahead and state your name in the microphone for the recording?
Yes. Name is Francesco Patinga. Just have a couple of questions regarding the dispensary. Were you thinking also getting any craft growers or also infusions?
Sorry, what was that?
The craft growers, like part of the same infusion like for the same part of the marijuana. Are you guys thinking of getting other facilities here in town?
I don't think we've even come close to discussing that yet. We're just still debating on whether the general dispensary is even gonna be here.
Okay.
We haven't got that far yet.
Okay. I have an investor that's actually has a business here in town, and he would like to keep it here. He doesn't want to go out of town because it's going to come, whether we want or not. It's going to employ about at least 20 full-time employment, and about 14 part-time. So it's going to be good for the community. It's going to bring more taxes in. So just we wanted to know when, more or less, the date when you guys can make a decision.
So you're talking about a certain type of dispensary? What? I'm not sure I understand what.
The dispensary, the same one that the same one you guys are talking about. But there's other methods, that there's other procedures that they go into it also.
Okay, it's good to know, I guess.
Kevin?
So I've only read 240 pages of the 600-page document, but I have passed what he is mentioning. Right now, the discussion is just a recreational dispensary. There is other things that could come along. There can be people that would be licensed to grow, like you're only supposed to have so many plants or whatever. You have to have a state license and everything. Haven't even approached that yet because recreational dispensary, if you're licensed to grow it, you have to have a place to sell it. So before we get down that path, we need to decide whether we're going to have a recreational dispensary here in town. But Cresco Labs would be the main grower, and then as he said, people could, the city would have to allow it, and then people could obtain a state license and be state regulated to become a grower. What I'm reading is that usually only happens in areas where you don't have a facility already growing. So that's why I didn't even approach that, because we have an area right outside of town that's a licensed grower facility.
Thank you.
Wanda?
I just want to clarify on the tax. What kind of a tax is that?
Wanda, can you use
Is
the
that-
microphone, please?
You repeat that.
You can't hear me?
Nobody online will be able to hear you.
The 3% tax, what kind of, is that a tax on the people that are selling, or is that a sales tax?
Kevin?
The law allows each municipality to add a up to 3% sales tax on top of the regular sales tax in town that would only be assessed at the dispensary. So only the people that would go in there and buy product would pay that extra 3% on top of the regular sales tax at the dispensary. It's not a general public tax, it's just the end user.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Keller?
And in addition, I think we mentioned this last time, there's a tax that's also assessed by the state based upon the level of THC that's in there, starting at 10%, I believe? Right, for 35% THC, and then it goes up incrementally, 20% for more, and then 25% for higher concentration, like 35% THC.
That's a state tax. So.
Yes, that's a state tax, correct.
All right, I don't want to cut the conversation off. We're going to be coming back to this anyway, so we're going to go ahead and move on. We've got swearing in a firefighter, James Cosby, as newly appointed Lincoln Fire Inspector. James, would you like to come on up? Or Chief, do you want to say anything? Or
No. You covered it well.
Thank you.
Please say aye, and then say your name, and then repeat after me. James Cosby. Having been appointed to the office of Fire Inspector in the city of Lincoln, the County of Logan,
in the County of Logan,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of Fire Inspector
of the Office of Fire Inspector
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, sir. You will need to sign.
Congratulations. Hey, James, we need you up here to sign.
Doesn't make an official sign.
Congratulations. Moving down, then we have new Logan County's proposed UTSP 911 intergovernmental agreement cost for City Council approval. Chief, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. We met with Mr. Hoblet, State's Attorney Hauge, on Friday, and the sheriff, and we went over some other items that we needed to cover inside that agreement, including trying to clarify the options of getting out of that agreement if that would ever change. I believe we have a pretty good draft now that has been sent to you all for review. If there's any other changes, please let us know immediately this week so we can get those changes made before Monday, before we can vote on that.
Mr. Keller?
Thank you, Mayor. In reading this over in the agreement, there's a formula, of course, that is given on page 3, which determines the amount of cost that all participants would be paying based upon many factors, including participant usage. And that amount then is $221,812.35. And this is the initial annual cost, correct? So this is reassessed then every year based upon the dispatch calls. Now, if I'm looking at the right, I think the last minutes that I had seen, the percentage of the dispatch calls in Lincoln were like an average of 56, 58, 60%. So we are bearing a little over half of all the dispatch calls in the county, if I read that correctly.
Correct, yeah. Right. It's kind of broken up by the 911 calls and the administrative calls. 30% of those 911 calls in and of themselves, either through VoIP, cellular, or landline calls. So by state statute, they can be responsible for that dispatching services of up to 30%. So that's that number. So next year, if that number changes and they have 25, then ETSB may not contribute as much. So we may have to pick up a bigger portion next year. Or if 911 calls go up and administrative calls go down, then they may be responsible for more. So, and that'll be based on that formula, essentially.
Thanks, Chief. Then is that reassessed then and at each county fiscal year?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So then we would know, because the county fiscal year is in what? December? Right, so then we would have a good idea by the time we budget for the next year in the spring of the year. Okay, thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Is this on the regular agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Next, we have the marijuana dispensary presentation. If you guys like to come forward. Kevin?
So, Eli and April are coming forward. Eli McVeigh is, he works in a data-driven research industry. He's worked in that throughout his career. He's worked for Nielsen and used for pricing, promotion, and assortment decisions. He's been a consultant for companies in the cannabis industry, and he's now employed as an analysis, and his expertise is used in the marijuana business in Colorado. And so he's here to give us a presentation on why we think we should have a a recreational dispensary in Lincoln?
Yeah, so thank you. I appreciate the time here. Thank you for the Lincoln City Council for giving us the time, for Kevin for spearheading this. For those that you that don't know, my name's Eli McVeigh. Here with me is April Glosser. And like Kevin had mentioned, we're here because we're looking to start a marijuana dispensary, and we think Lincoln that would be a good place for that. So what I want to do with these slides here is take you through a little bit of information about where the law stands in Illinois as it pertains to recreational marijuana, why we think Lincoln would benefit from having a recreational marijuana dispensary. We'll address a couple of common concerns, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. So a little bit more about who we are. Again, my name's Eli McVeigh. I grew up in Atlanta, so just 10 miles down south on Route 66. I live in Denver. I work in the marijuana industry now as an analyst, a research and data analyst. April Glosser here. I'll let you introduce yourself.
It's already on. All right. I am an entrepreneur. I have a competitive intelligence business. We help organizations make transformational decisions with data and research. So Eli and I have worked together in that space before. I'm also from a small town in northern Illinois, Rochelle, Illinois, and looking forward to having this opportunity to talk with you a little bit about our ideas. Okay, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so also my brother, who couldn't be with us here today, he's also a business partner with us, grew up in Atlanta. He lives in Boston. He's an investment banking analyst. So now, kind of turning to the screen, I just want to give a little here's a recap of where we are as it pertains to recreational marijuana. The sale and consumption of recreational marijuana starting on January 1st, 2020 is going to be legal for everybody over the age of 21. So just like alcohol, recreational marijuana is going to be legal in the state. People consume it if they so choose. That's just the situation we're in now. But what I wanted to do, because recreational marijuana is a hot topic, I realize it's come to Illinois very rapidly. I wanted to just give a little primer about what adult use marijuana or recreational marijuana is and what it is not, because I realize it's probably something that's very new to a lot of people here in the room, kind of unfamiliar territory. So, what adult use or recreational marijuana is? So, very basic, cannabis comes from the cannabis sativa or cannabis indica plant that naturally produces THC or tetrahydrocannabinol. It's the main intoxicating compound found in marijuana. It's what gives people the feeling of being high when they consume it. It's used by anywhere between 15 to 25% of the adult population, primarily for relaxation or pain relieving purposes. Functionally, it's the exact same thing as medical marijuana. It's just that next year here in Illinois, you're not going to have a prescription or a recommendation from a doctor to use it. When we talk about recreational marijuana, what a lot of folks are going to think about is what we're seeing right there, kind of the traditional flower. So that can and will be sold here in Illinois, but it's also, marijuana can be processed further into oils for vape pens or used in brownies like we're seeing here, or in drinks. It can really be processed into any number of different product types. Look, I know that there is a stigma and some baggage associated with recreational marijuana. I totally understand that. But having lived in Denver for the last couple of years, working in the industry, I can assure you that this is a professional industry run by professional people. It's one of the most highly regulated industries in the world. So kind of that, the stereotype of the guy in the corner with the dreads and the tie-dye T-shirt selling you a bag of pot, it really does not apply to the cannabis industry anymore. Like I said, everything that you see here on the screen, these products are going to go through rigorous lab testing to ensure quality, to ensure safety. Everything that's sold in a dispensary is going to leave the store in child-proof packaging. This is a professional industry, and I really do think that comes through when you look here at some of the, what a recreational marijuana store looks like. You can see here on the screen these, they're well lit, they're open, they're inviting. It looks like any other sort of high-end retail store. Oftentimes, these are places where you can't really tell that they're selling cannabis, and it's certainly not something that's going to be like an eyesore on the community. So I can't tell you that this is exactly like what a store we are looking to put in Lincoln is going to look like, but it's at least going to resemble this in some capacity. And I think it kind of illustrates the level of professionalism, the level of sophistication that's really come to define the modern cannabis industry. So what adult use cannabis is not, because there is, like I said, this is a new issue. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. First off, this is not an immediately dangerous substance. You cannot smoke too much marijuana and die. It is not possible. You can absolutely smoke too much marijuana and have a bad time, have an unpleasant experience. Everybody has heard those stories before. But the idea of like a marijuana overdose or something like that, it's just not, it's not physically possible. There's also nothing physically addictive about marijuana. Certainly, just like any other substance, people can become dependent on it. But it's not like other drugs, harder drugs like heroin or methamphetamine, where you're going to have some sort of physical symptoms of addiction. You're not going to be seeking out that next high or want to do everything you can to find that next high. Marijuana just does not have those harsh, physically addictive properties. And also, it's not a precursor to other drug use. The idea of the gateway theory of marijuana, that people that try marijuana are going to go on to use other harder drugs, methamphetamines, heroin, like I had mentioned. That idea has been consistently debunked. The vast, vast, vast majority of people that use marijuana are not going to go on to use other harder drugs. People that use marijuana and other harder drugs, these are the people that are just predisposed to drug use. It's not marijuana driving them to harder drug use. And this isn't a substance that is entirely good or bad. It's not that black and white. I'm not here to evangelize marijuana. I'm not here to tell you that everything about marijuana legalization is sunshine and rainbows. Just like alcohol, there's going to be people that can use it responsibly and have a good time. There's going to be people that have problems controlling their use. The difference with marijuana, however, is that the consequences of use or dependency relative to other drugs is quite minor. And I think that when you take a real critical eye to marijuana legalization and the issue of whether or not to allow a dispensary in the town, I really do think the positives outweigh the negatives on this. So a real quick recap of what's happening right now in Illinois. So you've got 55 existing medical marijuana dispensaries throughout the state. On January 1st, those 55 dispensaries are going to they're going to be allowed to sell to the recreational market. Each of those 55 dispensaries, if they so choose, and most probably will, can add one more recreational store in addition to their medical marijuana dispensary. Then in May of 2020, 75 new rec dispensaries are going to be granted. This is where we are going to be applying for one of these new 75 dispensary licenses. So by the end of 2020, we're looking at probably about 185 recreational marijuana dispensaries operating in the state of Illinois. And I know that number kind of looks big when it's up there on the screen, but for context, in Colorado, which is about half the size in terms of population as Illinois, they've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 560 dispensaries. So it is the case that Illinois has taken a pretty conservative approach when it comes to marijuana legalization.
Can I stop you for just a second to ask a question about that particular slide? So the way I understand it is, if I looked and researched correctly, what the state has done is to divide the state into different regions, and each region, so they're geographically allotting these new 75 different licenses according, so they're not like all going to be in Chicago, so they're going to be geographically dispersed. Am I correct? And if I'm right on that, there's the region we're in, which is the West Central region, has like 15 different counties, and they're only allowing 3 in those 15 counties.
Yes, that's correct.
So the reality of us getting one is very low.
And it's actually something I was going to touch on a little later. But yes, the way you've assessed that is correct. They're not going to be distributing these equally throughout the state based on geography and its population. So of those 75 licenses, 50 are going to go to Chicago and surrounding suburbs. So, against the field, Lincoln may not get one. Go ahead. Yeah.
I've actually gotten that question often, and I do think it's a pretty competitive environment, both for applicants and for communities who would like to some control over cannabis in their community. And the approach that we're taking is we're hoping to be able to partner with a community who sees the benefits and our assets as a strong applicant, and work together to do the best that we can for the community in ways like one of the parameters of the application is a community reinvestment. So how can we partner with a community to reinvest back into the community in a way that's meaningful to the community, as opposed to, not that this is bad, just writing a check. So I think that the winning scenario is going to be a scenario where a community and a strong applicant come together to write the right solution for the community in advance of the application.
I also have a question about this.
Okay.
It says, the second 55 says existing dispensaries that add one recreational store each. Now, does that mean the one here in Lincoln, the outskirts of our town, will have a store?
No, so this is actually dispensary specifically. What you've got outside of Lincoln is a cultivation facility. Yeah, so they're growing and not selling, and so dispensaries are they're just selling cannabis, yeah. Yeah, and so like I was going to say here, cities and towns are doing exactly what we're doing here today. They can ban marijuana businesses like dispensaries from operating within their jurisdictions. But, the way the law is written, there's nothing that's going to prevent people from consuming cannabis, no matter how the state or how the town decides to legislate as it pertains to recreational marijuana dispensaries.
Another question.
Sure.
On that, could you go back to that slide? So
Yeah.
the first one says existing dispensaries that convert to recreational on January 1st. So there are 55 that are dispensing right now in Illinois?
There are 55 medical dispensaries right now, and then come January 1st, 2020, most of those, probably all of them, will convert to the rec. So they will sell both to the medical market and the recreational market.
Selling to, but not selling to the public.
Yes, they will be selling to the public. So they will. So if
Ours
you.
will be selling to the public.
So what you have operating outside of Illinois on the outskirts of town, they're just growing cannabis, and then they sell that cannabis to a retailer or somebody that's going to process marijuana. The place outside of Lincoln is not. People aren't going there. Medical patients can't walk in there and buy cannabis.
This doesn't make sense.
Just real quick.
Sure.
To explain to everybody, because a lot of people don't know what Cresco Labs is out on the edge of town. Cresco Labs is a medical marijuana cultivator. They grow the medical marijuana and they dispense it from there to the medical marijuana community. As Eli said, you go out there, there's a big chain link fence around it. It's monitored 24/7 by the Illinois State Police, and all they do is grow marijuana there to distribute to the medical facilities. There's a very limited number of growers in the state of Illinois. They're very regulated, but obviously that would be the one downstate here that would supply a lot of the medical marijuana. So I just want to clarify that when the questions come in, that we do not have a facility right now. That is just a cultivation facility on the outside of town.
Yeah, so really the question is, how can adult use or recreational marijuana benefit the town of Lincoln? And so I think it's really just worth reiterating. The recreational marijuana is being consumed, has been consumed, will be consumed in Lincoln, no matter how it decides to regulate marijuana dispensaries. The only difference is come January 1st, 2020, that cannabis is going to come in a lot fancier packaging, and instead of people driving to their guy's house to pick up some stuff, they're just going to drive to the local licensed dispensary and purchase it there. But by allowing dispensaries to operate in Lincoln, the town stands to benefit in some really direct ways, more than it would otherwise. So job creation, a dispensary is going to be a good source of jobs for people that need them. You don't have to have a college degree or some sort of specialized form of education to work in a dispensary. We'll provide the training, and we'll be able to pay, 15 to 20% higher than comparable jobs in retail or fast food, for example. And that's also going to serve as a boost for the local economy. A marijuana dispensary is just like any other business. They need electricians and contractors and janitorial services and landscaping and so on and so forth, all of which, we're going to look to purchase and contract for here in the local community. And that's going to have trickle-down effects, as our employees go out and, spend their money in the community. The businesses that we work with, their employees go out and spend money in the community, and bars and restaurants and gas stations. It's going to have a multiplier effect more than just the revenue we're going to bring in on our own. And it's also going to give you more control of your local black market. So most 90% of our business would come from people that are already using cannabis. You will get a little bit of people that maybe used in the past or are curious now that it's legal. But our business model really is just going to be converting those dollars that are currently being spent in the black market into a licensed, tested, regulated retail channel that's going to have the economic benefits that I just described there. And as April had mentioned earlier, community outreach programs. This is something that I think gets overlooked oftentimes when folks are talking about recreational marijuana. But every dispensary that wins a license here in the state of Illinois is going to be required to engage in these community outreach efforts. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach with this. So, I've seen examples of stores closing for a day so employees can volunteer their time to some sort of local volunteer effort, or a portion of sales being donated to a senior-focused food bank. There's any number of approaches or forms this can take, and it's going to be something that's sustained. It's not just going to be a one-off effort, and it's going to be something that's tailored specifically to the needs of the local community.
Are you done?
Go ahead.
Mr. McVeigh?
Yeah.
I know when you spoke to me on the telephone, I asked you the question that why in the world, if someone's buying it illegally, would they pay more money to buy it legally? And I thought what Mrs. Rolfs brought here said exactly that expensive regulations and high demand across the county in California have made the illicit trade more profitable than going legit. And it just makes, to me, and I know you said, well, eventually you told me on the phone, eventually they will drop off and quit selling it. But it just makes more logical sense to me that people that are paying less and want to pay less and have been paying less aren't going to want those taxes that we would add and the state would add. Why in the world? Well, maybe it's safer, but that's my question.
So the California example is a little tricky. California's had a black market for decades, not like the state of Illinois. But the black market, you're right, it's not going to recede immediately. But it is the legal market, just by commercial forces, is going to eventually destroy the black market, as marijuana will become cheaper in a licensed retail store. Also, when you go into a licensed retail store, the quality of the products is going to be much higher. It's not going to be something that some guy has that you don't know what it is, you don't know where it came from, and the selection is going to be much greater. It's not going to be just, run-of-the-mill marijuana flower. Again, you don't know where it came from. You're going to have high-quality lab-tested edibles or concentrates or what have you. So over time, market forces will really erode the black market. It's not going to happen immediately, but it will happen. And we've seen it time and time again. California's still in the early days of legalization, and it's kind of an edge case. So the black market still has a presence there. But yeah, rest assured the black market will recede over time.
And let's not forget the state of Illinois is really invested in getting their tax revenue out of this. And so the black market, the product that you get off the black market will remain illegal after the January 1st. Now, that may be a hard distinction to make in some cases on the law enforcement side of things, but the state of Illinois is really incentivized to get their tax revenue. So they don't want to see a continued thriving, strong black market and a fledgling tax avenue. So they'll be inspired to fix that problem as well. So we'll have help.
I want to touch on what she said. In the first pages of this document, it is very clear that the only thing that remains legal in the black market marijuana is like if an officer pulls somebody over and they have a very small amount, they would get a ticket. If you have a larger amount, you're getting arrested for selling an illegal drug. So the guy standing on the corner can't stand there and argue that, hey, don't go over there and pay taxes, I got it right here for you. That is still illegal. It is only legal when it is sold in a controlled way. That's why when the gentleman said about growers, those people have to get licenses from the state, be inspected, and to grow marijuana for their own use. They're not allowed to sell it unless they sell it to a commercial facility. So there is a lot of this that is still illegal and will remain illegal, which, in my opinion, as they've said, will drive the illicit market out, and people will just feel more comfortable going into a dispensary and purchasing it because they know what they're getting and from who, and not take the chance that they're meeting their friend down the street that says they have it, and it could still be a sting or a bust, and they're still going to jail whether they cry that it's legal or not.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to go back to my question I had asked earlier. First of all, again, thank you for your willingness to possibly invest in our community. Again, considering that the law dictates that there will be some, among the some 20 counties that the region we're in, only 3 will be in the 2020, maybe perhaps after 2021, 2022, there'll be more, but of the 75, only 3 in this 20-county region. What is it about your application that would excite the state? Because if we have to go up against, in a very competitive market, what is it you're willing to offer? What is it you're willing to offer on behalf of the city? Because we want to know what we would be getting into as well as a city. So what is it you would be promising that would get the attention of the state so much they would say yes?
I think that's a great question. So first of all, we haven't mentioned, but we should mention, we're investing quite a lot in this application. There's a $5,000 non-refundable fee just to submit the application, and that's the least of our worries. We've engaged professionals who know what they're doing in this space to help us with the application, help us write the application in a way that it can be most competitive. We are hiring a security firm once we've determined what location we'll be in to write a security plan so that our application again stands out from others who haven't done that homework. As far as our partnership, we have a really strong partnership. We've strategically filled gaps so that we have everything covered. Eli clearly has experience in the cannabis industry in an intellectual way. Peyton has a lot of experience in retail, can help us make decisions and advice on how to build out a retail store for success. And of course, I am an entrepreneur with experience building strategies that will be profitable and help us move forward in a positive direction. I think the community reinvestment and the partnership with a community, as I mentioned before, will be a big part of our application. So making sure that we're doing the best that we can for our community, and that community is supporting us as we're seeking our license. I feel like there's a couple other things, Eli.
Well, I think, yeah, that partnership with the community is what the state wants to see. They want to see that you're engaged with that local community. They want to see that that local community is in favor of this. This is really a situation where, yeah, like I had mentioned, the state is looking for a partnership between the businesses and the towns where they're located. And that's why we've reached out to Lincoln. You know, it's not an accident that we reached out to Lincoln because I have ties here. We had debated over other markets, Rockford, some of the suburbs in Chicago. I don't have local connections there. I'm not a part of that community. And we think a strength of this application will be ties to the community, and we want to engage in that partnership.
And I will say one other thing on that topic. Originally, there was rumor that there would be a lot more licenses available. And so when there came to be fewer licenses, we took a pause as a partnership because we were going to be, competing for fewer licenses, which made it a riskier endeavor for us. And as we talked through this internally, and as we talked through this with some experts in the industry, they helped us understand what a great opportunity this was for us because we had such a strong application and such a breadth of strength across our partnership that put us in a really favorable position to get an even more valuable license. And so we've kind of been asking those questions as we've gone, and some of those reality checks is reaching out to experts and professionals and saying, are we still heading in the right direction? Is this still a risk we're willing to take? And we keep getting the indication that from experienced people that this is going to be a really strong application.
Well, I do have some follow-up questions on the specifics of what we would be on the hook for as far as community partnership, but maybe that's a discussion I can have more individually with you after the meeting.
Sure.
I want to definitely switch gears here a little bit, but the reality is this is still, legalization of marijuana is still a federal law, that it's still a
Correct.
crime on the federal level.
Correct.
The Controlled Substances Act still declares it illegal, even though there's been some decriminalization. And so I guess ask this question to you or anybody who knows, would we as a city be on the hook if the federal government decided to reverse course and instead of decriminalizing, actually saying, no, we're going to enforce this particular law? Would a city such as ours, a municipality that has said, we're going to allow it, be on the hook and basically be liable for disobeying a federal law?
So it's a great question, and you're right, this is still federally illegal. You talk to anybody in the industry, nobody's worried about a federal crackdown, and it really comes down to the politics of the situation. You look at, where public support stands for marijuana. You're looking at 60, 70, 80% of Americans supporting legalization. So any effort by the federal government to crack down on marijuana businesses, it would be politically, that would be it would be a terrible move. And in terms of like in a scenario where that did happen, there has been instances. You think back 10 years ago when there was a little bit of federal action against marijuana businesses because it was federally illegal. It was never at the municipal level. It was against. It was either against the business itself or maybe the landlord. But as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I know, there's never been any federal action against a municipality for allowing it. And I just don't think we live in a world now where anybody in a federal position to crack down on marijuana would do so. It's just not politically expedient.
Yeah, and that's not the first time we've been asked that question. It is a good question. But another point of evidence is, we may be investing small time compared to something like Cresco Labs. I mean, there's a lot of businesses that spend a lot of time thinking about this, and their concern is so minimal that they're investing millions of dollars into this. And so that's another indicator that everyone's pretty secure that this is going to continue in this direction.
I think Cresco.
I just have a couple quick questions. So how much would 2.5 ounces or whatever for medical, depending on THC or whatever it's called, how much would that cost at a medical facility?
I'll be honest with you. I don't know exactly what that costs in Illinois right now. That's usually not public information. Yeah, that's a great person to ask, right?
$400. Sure.
So $300 or $400 for an ounce.
Unless you go with shake.
Right.
So, and so then how much would recreational cost an individual? Because you had mentioned, more than likely that medical users would probably just become, it's my perception, maybe just purchasing it recreationally so that perhaps there wouldn't be that additional cost. So what's the breakdown for that? Because that could be a big incentive for someone wanting perhaps, recreational versus medical.
Yeah, well, so it's a supply and demand issue, and it really boils down to the economics of each state's marijuana market, and they're totally different. So if we think about Colorado, for example, I think I mentioned earlier, there's not a real difference between medical and recreational marijuana. Generally, these are the same things, but medical marijuana is going to be taxed much lower. So in terms of like the wholesale price of it, like what it costs to grow and what you're putting it on the retail shelves for, they tend to be about the same price because again, it's the same thing, but they're not putting the 25 to 30% tax on recreational marijuana. So generally speaking, they're about the same price, but you're going to be paying far less in taxes as a medical marijuana user. Now that could change, that could be different here. It probably will be different in the first, few months, even year of legalization. The market's going to have a kind of a hard time figuring all this out. It's not a perfectly competitive environment, so there's going to be some unique factors here at play in Illinois. But usually those tend to, the prices of medical and recreational marijuana are about on par.
You also mentioned that you can't smoke too much marijuana, right?
In terms of like smoking, like with alcohol, you could drink too much and die. There is no equivalent of that in marijuana.
So, are the majority of the sales typically in smokable form, eating? When you say consuming, that's both smoking and actually ingesting.
Right.
So, what would be the percentages typically that you see?
So, traditional flower, like what we think of when we think of recreational marijuana, that's about 40% of the market. Vape pens or vaporizers, you're looking at about 30. Edibles, so you think about, a brownie or a cookie or whatever, you're about 15. And the remainder of that market is, various products like drinks and, lotions or concentrates.
On the edibles, can someone consume too much where it's different than maybe smoking?
So that's an issue that really that Colorado faced in the early days of legalization. So everybody's probably heard stories where they might have like a cookie, and that cookie would be, if you read the package, it would say that cookie was 10 servings of 10 milligrams of THC, but somebody's just going to eat it all, right? So they realized real quickly, like, we have to put some pretty stringent regulations around this. So while there would be nothing stopping you from there isn't anything stopping you from taking a whole bottle of Tylenol, there wouldn't be anything stopping you from taking a bunch of edibles, but they are marketed, and the state is really taking a close eye at this to make sure that people know exactly how much THC is in a single serving of marijuana. And there's labels and warnings all over these packages that are telling consumers, hey, take one of these. It's in an individual blister pack. Wait a couple hours. It is very clearly labeled when you buy a marijuana edible of what it's going to do to you, how long you should wait, how much you should take.
So, but you can consume too much edibles?
You could take...
What's the consequence of that? Let's say you eat 10 of those.
Okay, well, the next 6 hours aren't going to be unpleasant. You're probably going to be paranoid. You're probably going to have your heart rate will probably go up. You could vomit. You may not. But that's about it. Yeah, you're going to have a pretty unpleasant 6 to 8 hours.
One last question. So you've been in Colorado, and it's been how long it's been legal there?
2012 is when they started recreational sales, or legalized recreational marijuana.
And you're a data guy and researcher, and I'm sure that you've probably researched or heard the drawbacks of this, that's happened in Colorado, right? I'm just kind of curious.
Can you speak more specifically to
Well, I don't know. I'm just trying to find out what you know about any of the drawbacks that the state has seen since 2012. And if you could expound on that.
Well, I can speak a little to that. And Eli, you can jump in, being a now Coloradoan, hoping to bring him back to Illinois, you see. One of the issues that we hear come up is the difficulty in policing and the difficulty in zero tolerance workplace policies, because there doesn't currently exist a blood test or a breathalyzer test that indicates that right now currently you are at an impaired level. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So that's something that continues to be a challenge there. Eli, you shared with me some research that they're working on there's a company working on a breathalyzer test currently. They do now have a test that instead of those 30-day tests that we think about now, they can isolate it to 24 hours, which helps but doesn't completely solve the problem. So there are some real challenges for law enforcement in those regards. That's some of the things that I've heard crop up from those more mature markets.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most prescient issue. I'll fast forward here a little bit. Yeah.
And while you're doing that, because one of the things that I was able to find to research is since 2012, although I don't know if you can do a direct correlation to it, but the homelessness rates has gone up tremendously in the state of Colorado since 2012, since the legalization of marijuana.
As someone that lives in Denver, I'll tell you, it's not marijuana legalization, it's housing prices. I pay way too much to live in Denver, and so does everybody else there. And that's really been that's what the city's focused on, is combating housing prices, rising housing prices.
Well, I didn't say Denver, I said the state of Colorado.
Yeah, well, so prices all across the Front Range, so along the Rocky Mountains there, have risen as more people have come to Colorado. So housing prices is an issue most pronounced in Denver, but applies all across that Front Range, and it really isn't. There's several other states with marijuana legalization, and there's very few states, even if it's not illegal, very few states are really taking a crackdown against marijuana users. It's not the case that people flock to Colorado after legalization and now they're homeless. It's just, I don't think it's that simple. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on. Yep.
I believe Mr. Carter had a question earlier. He just wanted to know if the same products, medical products, would be still available at the local dispensary.
Yeah. So if we were allowed to be a dispensary here in Lincoln, we would be a recreational dispensary, not a medical dispensary. But like I said, these products, the difference between medical and recreational products, there almost is no difference. They're functionally the exact same thing. So what we could do, we would not be able to offer lower taxes on a product. That's just, we couldn't get around that state law. But what we could do is people that come through the door and can prove that they're a medical marijuana patient, we can apply discounts to that product to make it a comparable, the end price, what they're paying out the door, is similar to what they would pay in the medical market. So yes, I think we can serve the medical community here in Lincoln. It's just technically speaking, no, we would not be a medical marijuana dispensary.
I think he was asking about specialized products, though, correct?
Yeah, gummies, RSOs, CO2 oils, and I do. Illinois has the highest prices in the country for medical, and I'm on Social Security and a pension, so I buy shake and make my own, and so. Save some money.
Yeah, and as recreational marijuana prices come down, I think that you'll certainly be paying less for the product, because the types of products you're describing we would be able to carry no problem. And yeah, over time, I think those products will definitely go below what you are paying now in the medical market.
Will you also be offering CBD products?
Yeah, I think the market's really moved a long way towards CBD. So yeah, just as being a business person, I think we would absolutely offer CBD products.
All right, Mr. Gonzo has a question, then we're going to let you guys finish your presentation, then come back to questions at the end, if there are any. So,
thank you, Mayor. I think you mentioned different regions, that the state will be divided into regions, and there'll be so many stores per region. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the region that we're in consists of 20 counties. Is that what you
Roughly 20 counties,
22.
Yeah. Is it 22? Yeah.
And how many stores would there be in those 22 counties? 3.
Yeah.
And that 22 is?
It's west central Illinois. If you have a map there. Yeah. So not many dispensaries throughout the state.
It's a big area, and some other municipalities that we've talked about, another advantage, and Eli, you touched on this, but was the secondary tax revenue. So if Lincoln was lucky enough to get a dispensary, you'll serve a market that currently exists, but you'll also be pulling that market in from other towns. And towns are treating this differently. Some are burying it kind of in an area out of the way. Others are putting it in a place strategically where people come off the interstate and drive by their restaurants and their shops and other things in their town to get to a dispensary, so that they see all that your town has to offer and spend money in those places, not just on that trip, but on subsequent trips to come just enjoy your town later. So there's a tourism element and a draw that hopefully will provide some synergy for your other businesses.
Okay, so I just there's a couple of quick concerns that I've heard, crop up time and again, so I wanted to try to address those head on, and then, we'll finish up here and take any remaining questions. So what I think is a very valid concern and a great question is, how will allowing a recreational marijuana dispensary in town, how will that impact youth usage rates? And so what we've...
This is really important.
Well, you can see it. So while we see that the usage rates among adults does tend to increase slightly with marijuana legalization, youth usage rates actually decline. And, I'm not making these numbers up. These come from two recent reports, one from the state of Colorado, one from the Journal of American Medical Association, and they both found essentially the same thing, that when you have legalization in general and a dispensary in a local area, you tend to see youth usage rates go down. And they're attributing that to the decline in the black market.
By 8 or 9%, so a significant number.
Yeah, and it really comes down to, when you've got a dispensary in town, over time that black market is really going to erode. And then it just becomes much more difficult for people underage to get their hands on cannabis. You walk into a licensed retail store, they are going to check your ID hard. They're going to make sure that you have a valid ID, that you're of age. They have every incentive to follow the letter of the law. The state will come down hard on people that are selling to minors. And so that's really, I think, a very positive benefit of allowing a dispensary in the town, is the local black market over time will be destroyed, and that just makes it harder for people underage to get their hands on this stuff. I'm not going to belabor this point. If Lincoln decides to allow a dispensary, what we've been talking here, it's not going to be a situation like you have in Portland where there's more dispensaries than there are Starbucks. Like I said, the state of Illinois has taken a very conservative approach here. If you allow a dispensary, it could be the case that you get one, you could get none, but it's certainly not going to be the case that you're going to have dispensaries on every corner. Another great question I've heard come up is, will having a dispensary in town increase crime? And so I've looked out there, I've looked at research, people, looking at local areas where they have dispensaries, is there any appreciable impact on crime rates? And they really haven't found one, and to me that makes perfect sense. I mean, the effect of marijuana on a user, it's not like alcohol. It's not going to lower their inhibitions. People that use marijuana are infinitely more likely to stay at home, watch Netflix on their couch. They're not going to go out and commit crimes. There's no evidence of that, and there's no physical addiction that comes along with marijuana, so they're not, itching to go out and try to get that high. And then again, if you look at the laws and the regulations for the state of Illinois, licensed dispensaries are going to be one of the most secure pieces of property in the town. You have to have a contract with a security provider. You're going to have alarms and cameras and motion detectors and floodlights. Somebody would have to be out of their mind to try to rob one of these places. They'd get caught immediately. So really, we would not expect to see, and places that have legalized marijuana and allowed dispensaries are not seeing any sort of appreciable rise in crime due to allowing a dispensary.
But in some cases, Eli, you can probably cite this statistic, but in some cases, they're actually seeing property values rise a little in areas around a dispensary.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to, if you think about the pictures of the retail store I showed you, these are nice places. They attract a little bit more money. So we've seen actually, home prices around dispensaries can be on the rise. That's certainly something that's happened in Colorado. More than just not having negative effects on crime rates, they do tend to increase property value, and that comes along with some of the economic benefits that goes along with having a dispensary in the town. I've also heard, hey, look, I've got a job, they drug test, I don't want to be sitting next to somebody, they're smoking marijuana. I don't want to have to take a drug test and then fail that because somebody next to me was smoking marijuana. But the reality of the situation is, unless you're consuming marijuana yourself, you cannot, get high from a secondhand effect. You won't test positive on a drug test for marijuana if you're next to somebody using cannabis. So if anybody tells you that they didn't use cannabis and they tested positive on a drug test, I'm not saying they're lying, but science might say that they're lying. And so then, another valid concern, won't people drive to a dispensary, buy cannabis, use it, and then get behind the wheel of a car and drive home? Unless Lincoln specifically authorizes what are called social consumption lounges, and these are kind of like bars or hookah lounges where people could come and use cannabis in one of these public spaces, it will be illegal for anybody to consume marijuana outside of their own home. So just because recreational marijuana is legalized in the state, you can't use it in your car, you can't use it outside, you can't go to a park and use it. It will only be legal inside a private residence. And so then I just wanted to address, why are we, reaching out to you guys looking to set up a recreational marijuana dispensary in Lincoln? So in general, marijuana legalization offers April and Peyton, my brother, and myself, kind of a unique opportunity to exercise our own unique skill strengths and previous experiences to come back here and try to run a successful business. This really is kind of a unique opportunity for us, and it's not just a cash grab of us trying to, get rich selling marijuana. That really isn't the case. But we also do, we have a professional interest in Lincoln. Going back to the way the state allocates licenses, we firmly believe that there's not going to be any dispensaries on that 70-mile stretch of I-55 from Springfield to Bloomington. So setting something up here in Lincoln really does give us a chance to capture business from people here in Lincoln, but also the surrounding counties or the surrounding towns, and the thousands of people that are driving up and down 55 every day.
So that speaks to that's one of the strengths for Lincoln specifically for an application.
Yeah, but honestly, it's really more than just a professional interest in Lincoln. This gives me the chance to come back home, to try to run a business, to be closer to my family, to have my son, be closer to his grandparents. It is, like I said, it's just a unique opportunity, and it's one, I have local ties here, right? So I grew up in Atlanta. I played basketball at the YMCA every winter. I saw Dr. Kesa at the Family Medical Center for the first 20 years of my life. My favorite part of church on Sundays was getting out, going to the tropics, and eating as much ice cream as I could at the buffet. So I have an incentive to come to Lincoln and run a business. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want to do it on the backs of the community or in a way that it negatively impacts the community. And so for us, Lincoln really is, it's a market that is the right fit for the culture of our business. It's big enough to sustain a successful dispensary, but it gives us the chance to engage with and be a part of the local community and not make a negative impact by coming back here and trying to set up a dispensary. So with that, I'll go ahead and open up to any remaining questions.
Ron, did you have a question? Steve?
I would like to direct my question, I think, to Chief Adams, because I thought that it was his thoughts or his research has shown that there were some discrepancies, I think, to what you mentioned, that basically you said crime would not go up for the most part, and that it wouldn't cost, there would be less cost, or I would not say increased costs to help with the issues of crime. And I think Chief had mentioned in an earlier meeting that there would be increased costs with personnel and such. And so I'm just trying to, there's two differences of opinions here, and I'm just trying to get a better understanding.
Well, what they've seen from the research, and that goes from Colorado, it goes from California, it goes from Washington, is that the DUIs and those traffic accidents and fatalities of that nature, not necessarily crime rates in general, other than California, like you said earlier, California's kind of its own unique, it's still a baby type system set up out there. You've got Mexico down there that's feeding their drug market heavily, and they're still getting a lot of that black market coming up from there. Colorado, like Illinois, it's a little bit more stable from that issue, but it's going to happen here. Are there going to be robberies? Yeah, there are going to be robberies. I mean, this stuff isn't cheap. I mean, $300 for an ounce. It's going to be expensive, and you're going to have a black market sale just from the people buying. I mean, right now you can buy what, 2 ounces?
2.5 ounces every 2 weeks. If
Yeah.
you get premium flour, you're
Do you
looking
use
at $400.
Yeah. Do you use 2.5 ounces?
In maybe 10 years.
Yeah. So you're going to have that black market sale of it, even if it comes legally. So now I believe it's in Illinois. They're only allowed 30 grams.
look, I want to say it's about an ounce.
So-
yeah, for the-
30 grams.
30 grams is what I believe that they're allowed to
it's
possess. And the only place you can use it is at your home, but we know it's going to happen everywhere. Just like alcohol has happened everywhere. People are going to drive intoxicated. We have drivers that are intoxicated on alcohol. It's going to happen with cannabis. You're going to have those problems. And the bad thing is, and like you've said it, this next few years until things start to settle down and people will say, oh, the newness is worn off, and it gets to that point like alcohol is now, you're going to have problems. We're going to have problems in the next few years. The problem is the 8% that the state taxes, it's supposed to go to law enforcement. There's no guarantee that Lincoln's going to get any of that funding because it's all probably going to be grant-based, just like every other program they have. So most of it's probably going to go to the Chicago area anyway. So if we can have something here locally to help support our law enforcement, the fire department, and I don't know what kind of issues we're going to have with sewage and urine that comes off of THC use. So if they have to do anything different, so.
Yeah, and I think a reality is there's going to be cost and time and headache and just figuring out how to enforce these laws. And those things are just, with the law being passed as quickly as it is, that is just a reality and a headache that law enforcement is left with. And unfortunately, that's what you're left with, whether you have a dispensary or not, because consumption in your home in Lincoln is legal no matter what, January 1.
Like for mental health issues, we have problems with mental health issues now. And, I believe it was, they just did a study earlier this year in Colorado. They looked at all the ED visits from one hospital, and there was like 9,000 ED visits that were contributed to, let me see here, let me get the facts for you, so I don't misconstrue you. 9,973 visits that they came in for cannabis use in some way, shape, or form. And they found like the edibles tend to give more of a psychotic, have more psychotic issues. Because if you got somebody with a mental health condition already and you put marijuana on top of it, you're just tripping that trigger a little bit sooner than it had they not used cannabis. And they back that up in the research in this article. So we're going to have more problems. They're going to have more problems transporting people to the hospital, and the beds are going to be filled up more than they were before. So it's going to be a problem. I mean, they since cannabis was introduced in 2012, they've seen a threefold increase in ED visits just from cannabis-related issues. So,
if I can just make a quick
point. A lot of that, what you're talking about with those edibles, that's absolutely the case. As I mentioned before, people figured out how to properly label and package these things. Someone's going to take one of these things, not realize that they just ingested 10 servings of cannabis, and they're going to probably call the hospital. So I do think Illinois not being on the cusp of that, having had other states like Colorado and Washington and Oregon iron out some of these difficulties, I don't think you're going to see such an increased rate in people going to the hospital or things like that. These issues have been ironed out, and there are effective mechanisms by which to control them.
And I think what we're saying is, of course, there's going to be issues that continue to have to be ironed out, but it is nice that some states have gone before us, worked through some of those problems, and we have less to deal with than we would have had to deal with if we were pioneering this in Illinois.
Kathy Schmidt.
Police Chief Adams, I have a question for you. Professionally, can you tell me, do you think having a dispensary in Lincoln will be more harmful to Lincoln than, say, if it was in another place?
I don't know if it's going to be any more harmful. Being that if you can go to Springfield, and they have a dispensary there now, I'm correct, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And that one's going to be converted to a recreational at that point anyway. It's only 30 minutes away, so it's really on your guys' shoulders if you want to allow the actual sale here in Lincoln or not. So.
Sam.
No, I don't have a question, sir.
Mr. Keller.
Well, I don't want to end the conversation with other questions, but I know tonight was really merely just a presentation, but it does, I guess I would say it comes incumbent upon us here in the next few weeks to make this decision, whether we want to, as a municipality, want to prohibit the sale or whether we want to publicly open it up to say we are open for business in that regard. Because I think if there are potential businesses waiting to apply, knowing they would apply with the knowledge that the city of Lincoln would be receptive to it, we need to make that statement known. So I would propose we put that on the future COW.
Tracy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple. So the frequency that they can go to the dispensary is how often?
So there'll be purchase limits rather than frequency limits.
What are those?
So I don't quote me here, but I believe you're going to be limited to 1 ounce per day.
Per day.
Right.
So the fact that somebody could purchase 1 ounce per day, what does that do to the possibility that it starts to feed into the black market? I mean, I grew up in this town, and there's one thing that I know about this town. When I was underage, it wasn't very difficult to get beer because there's always somebody old enough to buy that will provide. And if you grew up here, you know the same. And
Sure.
You're going to see the same thing with this, given that frequency.
Yeah, and so really what I think it comes down to, it's incumbent upon your local operator to be aware of this. Like I said, there is every incentive in the world for people here to, if they have any suspicion that this is, somebody's coming in and trying to buy a large amount of cannabis, and you have any suspicion that's going to the black market, you're going to shut them down, because there have definitely been instances in Colorado when somebody purchases the legal limit time and time again, but the state has shown that that dispensary knew what was happening and didn't take any action. So it really is incumbent upon your local operators to make sure that people are not only following the letter of the law, but the intent of the law. And like I said, these operators have every incentive to make sure they're operating above the law, because the state will crack down fast, and it crackdowns hard, especially when it comes to marijuana, which is still a federally illegal substance.
Back, microphone. We'll have one more comment, then we need to get moving on.
Will a recreational dispensary register each individual product being sold like I have to be when I go to the medical dispensary? They scan it, the state knows I've bought it, the dispensary knows I've bought it, and whoever has access to that information. Or are these going to be like anonymous purchases?
These will be anonymous purchases.
But to follow up on that, the regulation and the audit that goes along with it, so while they may be anonymous purchases, as an operator, you are responsible for making sure what comes in the door goes out the door through legitimate means. One, because they don't want leakage to the black market in that way, and also because they want their tax revenue.
I think Tracy had one more final comment, then Kevin, then we're going to go on.
Yeah, so another thing that I was curious about was, so based on your research, what has your research shown regarding the increased costs of law enforcement and emergency response in relation to the revenue that's generated?
So I'm not aware of any research out there that right now that says this is how much it costs in increased medical services or relative to exactly how much revenue is. Maybe
did issues with law enforcement having to hire personnel go up 15%, go up 20% versus they saw a tax revenue increase in the city of 40% based on the dispensary being there?
Right.
Those are the type of things I'm
Sure,
curious
and I don't
about.
want to give you a number right now that I can't defend. But what I will say is, I think your chief here is right. There is going to be a little bit of a time period here where he has to figure out how best to police this stuff, how best to, monitor motorists that he might suspect are driving under the influence. There's going to be a little bit of an increased cost to that. But I do think, it comes back to these are costs that happen whether or not you have a dispensary here or not, just because, the consumption of marijuana is legal. What I can do is follow up with you to make sure that I give you an accurate number to reflect tax revenue relative to increased emergency services cost.
And going back to my last question, this last thing I got, Mayor. So you stated that they can get 1 ounce per day,
I'll double check with that, but yes, that's, as far as I'm aware, that's what we're at. Now, we will get more final rules and regulations come out here on October 1st that could clarify a bit of this, and we probably will see more clarification regarding this. But yes, as far as I understand now, it is a 1 ounce purchase limit per day.
And as a dispensary, you have the right to refuse sales?
Absolutely, for any reason.
Okay.
And those are good questions. I noted these, and we'll make sure we get back to you with answers.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Well, my first question is for Chief Adams, and this is going to catch him completely off guard. But in increased crime, and people think this is something you can get addicted to, can you say yes or no whether theft of cigarettes, which is highly addictive, has gone up when Illinois went to almost $8 a pack for cigarettes here recently?
I do know that there's a lot more over the state buying and brought in. So they'll go out of state and buy it to get around the Illinois state tax.
Okay, I just want to point out that the research I'm showing is tobacco use is highly more addictive and causes more crime than marijuana, is what I'm finding. So you guys can do your own research. The other thing I'd like to bring forward is, I know Ron said he'd like to put it on the next cow. I would like to put step 1 of possibly a 3-step process here. Step 1 would be whether the city's even going to allow a dispensary. Step 2 would be the deciding how much or when we're going to tax it, and where them tax dollars could go, because it's kind of like the utility tax. We could put a special tax on it and maybe say so much % of that can go to law enforcement. And step 3 would be then the council sitting down and writing regulations and an ordinance to control the hours, places the dispensary can be, and those kind of things. The reason I'm saying that is I had a conversation with a mayor on the way up to City Hall tonight from an adjoining county of a city about the size of Lincoln, and he is possibly watching this on YouTube, and they are getting ready to possibly bring it forward for them to allow a dispensary, because they also see the possibility of only 3 in this. They are part of the 20 county group. I'm hoping we can get ahead of this. Again, I'm just asking for the vote to be put on the next voting session to either allow or disallow a dispensary, and we could control the rest of it from there. By getting ahead of it, if it's voted on next week, or we could table it to the following voting session, I do believe these people have a very strong group of individuals and a very strong applicant process. And with the central location of Lincoln, I think that puts us in a very strong position to be awarded one of these dispensaries, along with our grow area outside of town. So I at least would like to put that on the next voting session. We can always table it, but I think delaying or waiting, we're just going to put ourselves behind the 8 ball here. It doesn't mean we're going to allow one. It just means we're voting to, if all the steps are taken, we would allow one.
Steve, you have a question off of that?
Yeah, I just want to make some comments off of that. So, you know, a lot of times here recently we've done things pretty rush. And I don't want to rush this. This is too significant for the citizens, for the youth of Lincoln. And I think we should, perhaps Ron can invite our mental health contacts and have them come in and give a presentation on, you know, their thoughts, the data, the research that they have, just because, you know, I think it's important to our youth, to our teens. You know, there's a drug problem out at the high school. There's a drug problem in the community. And our law enforcement, so they do a great job. But I don't think this is something that we should rush into necessarily, because I think there's many options other than the almighty tax dollar that I think that, you know, some people sitting around here is looking at, you know, for the city to perhaps benefit. Heck, we've had some citizens come in and want to remove the horn on the trains coming through, and there's people in this council that was not in favor of that if it saved one life coming through. If it saved one life so we wouldn't have the disruption of the horns coming through. I can probably guarantee you, we've probably had a few alcohol-related deaths in the city of Lincoln. We will have marijuana-related deaths in the community. And we're first so concerned about the death coming from, the potential death of a horn coming through, of a train coming through because they're no longer sounding the horn. Then, you know, as to what Wanda had mentioned earlier, you know, and the concerns for our youth, you have, and I think Chief mentioned, there's probably going to be drivers that are impaired, that are going to be in accidents that could cause, you know, just not bodily damage, but also, you know, the death. And to rush into this because it could bring in $1 into the city, I think we should really think about that and bring in our mental health people and maybe some. I volunteer at the Lincoln, or at the women's prison here in town, and it is a drug rehab program. And I can guarantee every one of those women would say, and I know to your point, you know, it's not the gateway drug, but I can almost guarantee you every one of those ladies that have a drug problem, they started, you don't just start with cocaine or heroin or whatever. It just doesn't happen that way. I'm not saying they get addicted to marijuana and then they have to go to something higher, but it's kind of like that, you know, oh yeah, I can do that, and then, oh yeah, I'll try this, and it's not that bad. And that's the problem with this drug. And so I don't want to rush into this as a councilman. I think there's too much at stake here with our youth. I think we're thinking too much about the dollars that it could bring in, and I just want to caution that council.
Final question I have, what kind of location would you be looking for within a city?
Sure, I'd be happy to. With the limited license environment, there probably isn't a location that it couldn't be a viable business. We have, you know, some high-level criteria that we would look for, 1,500 to 2,000 square feet in that area, somewhere with some parking that doesn't disrupt other businesses, but more along the lines of, how can we be a good partner? Is there a particular area of the community that you'd like to see developed and upscaled? This would be a good start to that. Is there a particular place we could locate that would have synergy with other businesses, that would bring people, that would bring some visibility to some other businesses, then we want to do that. So I think that even the site selection is something that we want to do with the community in advance of our application, as opposed to on our own and just saying, well, it fit your zoning requirements, so this is where we're going to be. We'd rather have that be an open conversation to see if it's kind of like a well-weaved strategy. There's so many different ways that we can help the community between site selection and community investment and tax dollars and philanthropic endeavors and community involvement. And we want to have all of those things. We want to have all of those conversations together.
So how do we want to proceed with this?
I would like to see it on the voting session. We can always table it. We can have a slight conversation before the voting session, and we can table it to the next voting session. I just think we need to make the first step forward in whether we are or are not going to do this, because there is other communities that are going to jump on this, and I firmly believe this is a one-time chance for us to capitalize on this. Obviously, I'm for it. I know there's councilmen that no matter what we say is going to be a vote, no vote. So we could bring in hundreds of people, but it's just we control the destiny, not only in whether we can have it or not, but once, if it is passed and they get a license, then we control it by regulation, just like we do liquor ordinances and other things we do. So we have the control. I don't think we should kick the can down the road or didn't mean to use that term, but we can table it if we're not ready to vote, but at least we have it on the voting session.
We're not ready to vote. We haven't heard from the community, from other constituents in the community. I think we've heard from a couple of people about this issue. I just don't think we should push this too quickly. We've pushed other things quickly, and it's bit us on the back end, and it's just something that I don't think this council should do. We've only discussed this twice, and it's just not something that I think that we're ready for.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there will be one 30 miles in Springfield,
Yes, there'll be two.
and there will be more coming up around us. So if Lincoln does not take this opportunity, there will be more within.
Bloomington?
Yes.
Springfield, Bloomington,
There's
Normal,
Yeah.
Peoria,
Yes. and
Danville.
You'll have something around Lincoln. Yeah, I mean, speaking personally, yeah, we will have to keep our options open, and we have to find a site
And
that we're gonna.
that's where I guess I would look at it as, I've never smoked marijuana, I have no intention of doing it, but if Lincoln's going to pass up on this opportunity and let one of our surrounding communities have it, when people will drive 30 minutes to get it regardless.
From a timing perspective, and what I understand is that by October 1st, a city has to have voted on whether or not they're going to tax the extra 3%. And so if you haven't done that by October 1st, you lose that opportunity for some time frame. And so a lot of communities are starting by voting that they will tax it at 3%, and then moving on to zoning and regulations, just so that they get their foot in the door for that. If we move forward, we get that 3%. So I wouldn't want you to miss out on that opportunity.
What do you guys want to do here?
One real quick. I want to congratulate Paul for coming forward and speaking 2 meetings in a row. I've had conversations with him. There's other people in this community that feel as strongly as he does that they would like a dispensary in this town so they don't have to go out of town and buy their medical marijuana. The problem is, a lot of these people, just like as we see every single week, nobody wants to show up and speak their mind. They don't want their names known, but I can tell you I've been contacted by dozens of people, and they all say the same thing. And I ask this question to all of them. When you go out of town to get your medical marijuana, what else do you spend your money on? And every one of them say, well, we stop at this restaurant, or we get the gas here, or we shop here, or whatever. The money is being spent, and the only reason they're going out of town that day is to go to the medical dispensary.
It's not going to be able to sell medical marijuana.
Right.
It's not going to be medical marijuana.
So I touched on this a little bit earlier. We will technically not be a medical dispensary, but we will offer the exact same products as a medical dispensary. And if people can show us and prove to us that they are a medical marijuana patient, we will be able to offer discounts to offset the increased taxes that they would pay on recreational marijuana.
The other thing is, I guess, and they don't sell it, but how many people even realize that Cresco Labs is there, and how many people has it affected? Yes, that's something to keep in mind as well. Tracy?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for flying in, coming and sharing this with the council. While clock proves that it's been a lengthy presentation that I'm sure will get watched in detail by people who are concerned about this, I think what this council has been tasked with is to ask ourselves a couple questions. More importantly, is this recreational marijuana and edibles and those types of products, are they going to come into the city based on our decision? And I think the answer to that is they're coming regardless of whether we welcome them in or not. Then the next question is, and I don't know the answer to this, but do we have the ability to better regulate how the community uses and well, I would just say uses those products, considering it's in our back door. We have law enforcement that can work with the business, and the business has the best interests of the community in mind. And lastly, Steve's right. I mean, there are people that are looking at the financial aspect of this. I can say that based on the fact that it's coming regardless. These people are going to buy this stuff. And it is coming back to Lincoln because there's a market for it. I think we're all wise enough to know that. I think that it would be a very wise decision to capitalize on that, as Kevin said, although I don't really like that term too much. But we are constantly looking for revenue streams for this city because, as we know, the cost of everything is going up. We have roads that are failing. We have police departments that are fighting drug problems. Emergency personnel costs a lot of money. And so I'm not saying that that's absolutely what we should do. I'm just saying these are things that we should think about in making these decisions.
All right, final comment, Ron.
Yeah, well, hopefully, we can have a decision of what we need to do, but I would probably say, as Alderman Baton said, maybe not the next regular voting session, but the next COW, bring this forward similar to what you're proposing or something different. And at that particular opportunity, we'll have for public to come forward or anybody we want to invite to come forward. That will give them that opportunity. We can take that, digest that, and then by that next voting session, we can make a decision.
So we'll place this on the next COW?
And we'll, based on Alderman Parrott's recommendation, will you be inviting someone from mental health to come in?
I can do that, absolutely, I will.
Okay, thank you guys very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, the individuals in the back have been very patient. Would you like to come forward with your presentation?
So coming forward, we have Laura Farwell and Anthony from the Keystone Power Holdings Group. They are going to be presenting a possible solar garden to help the city offset the utility cost of the sewage treatment plant. This is going on in several communities in central Illinois, and we took it upon chance to reach out to these individuals to see if they could offer us a savings for that. So that's what they would be presenting us.
Have more of those.
No.
Oh, the full art.
I just cut.
Yeah, if you send me the link, if you want to do, yeah.
All right, I'll try to send that.
I noticed.
All right, if you guys would, before you start, go ahead and say and spell your names.
Laurelyn Farwell, Lauralyn. Last name is Farwell, Farwell.
I'm Anthony Fotopoulos, so Anthony and Thony, and then Fotopoulos, unfortunately. Fotopoulos.
You notice I didn't try to say that.
You just said Anthony, I heard that.
Are we ready to go? So thanks to the city of Lincoln, the council members, everyone for the time today. I actually met Elizabeth at a rural development conference back a couple months ago, and we had an initial, she came to one of the solar presentations, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And we had a Mark Hunt from the city of Kelowna, who we're now developing the solar project for. It's a project very similar to the one we have, that you have the proposal for here. It's basically to develop a solar array that offsets the cost of electric at your wastewater treatment plant. You guys have a lot of usage, as we did the savings analysis of it. The most that we can build in Illinois in terms of an array size is 2 megawatts, and you guys are at that. So the good thing is that the bigger array size, the more savings it is. So you have a lot of usage out there. That's kind of the basics of it, and then I want to thank Kevin for kind of taking the ball from there and getting us down here. Anthony flew in from Philadelphia, and I'm up in the Northwest. So thanks again for your time. To kind of just couch this in what we're talking about, this is not a capital expense for the city. What we do is not like community solar. We're actually considered net metered project, which means that we take on all the responsibility of building, developing, financing it. So there's no capital investment from the city. We also maintain and operate the system. So really what the proposal is we're wanting to put this in. You get to go green, you get a lower rate, and we'll get further into this. But the bottom line is you're going to be making savings cumulatively. That's a lot. It's going to be lower than your current rate. You get to go green, and we're going to do the financing. You're basically, essentially agreeing to buy power at a fixed rate. It is a long contract. It's 25 years. And then we'll get more into, you can buy it out in 10, 20, and 25. But that's kind of the basics of it. And I'm going to let Anthony kind of go more into the power purchase agreement. Anthony has, he's a co-founder of Keystone, as Kevin mentioned, and he has about 14 years of experience doing projects very similar to what we're proposing all over the U.S. and New York and California. The reason that, and I'm just the regional business development manager for all of Illinois, and the reason we're seeing so much phenomenal interest in solar is because of the Future Energy Job Act and the adjustable block program that finances it. The reason that we just basically work with municipalities, and like Kevin mentioned, we're working with Kelowna, Freeport, about 5 or 6 others, and we're developing those now. But we're able to take the SRECs and some of the tax breaks that as a municipality you aren't able to do. So we work with municipalities, universities, and schools, and that's basically our core group. But Anthony, why don't you take it over from there? Maybe we can go a little bit more into what exactly a power purchase agreement is.
So thanks for having us. We know it's getting late in the day, so we'll go as fast as you guys would like to go. I talk fast. If you have questions, though, feel free to ask us. I don't think we'll be as interesting as maybe your first topic, but hopefully not as contentious either. So we're happy to go as fast as you like. So the first 2 pages are some about just some of the projects we've done as Keystone. As Laurelyn said, we do what we call MUSH, municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, and then some corporates as well. And what we do is, especially with municipalities and schools, they can't take tax advantage. And that's a big way of how you can pay for solar. There's federal tax incentives. We, as a tax-paying customer, can take advantage of those. And we can pass that benefit on in the form of lower rates through PAC. So there's state incentives for the Future Energy Jobs Act. There's a block program where you get the renewable portion of the energy. That is given by the state, and they're in block 4 for this type of project. There's only 4 blocks right now. There's about 6 to 7 projects in Amarin territory remaining in block 4. The law, Future Energy Jobs Act, anticipates more. They don't know where they're going to get the money to pay for more blocks. So we don't know that this is the end. There should be more, but the state doesn't know how it's going to pay for future blocks. And each block goes down a little bit, 5% less incentive from the state. So that's kind of how we pay for it. But in terms of what we ask of the city, there's literally no capital investment from the city. We completely pay for and finance the system ourselves. What we tell to our customers is you have to spend some time to review the proposal, to review the legal documents, to review where we're going to put it, to permit the system, to deal with this on landscaping if there's neighbors or those sorts of issues. So there's time investment, and then your lawyer. So the town lawyer, our contract, it's a standard contract from the National Renewable Energy Lab, but it's like 45 pages. It's the same form recommended by the Illinois Solar Energy Association. It's not like a form that we make to stick it to a town. It's a down-the-middle form done by literally the National Renewable Energy Lab, but it's 45 pages. So you have to go through it and make sure you understand. It's got every eventuality. If anything happens, if that's our fault, what do we have to do? If it's your fault, what would you have to do? Those sorts of things. So the only investment is time and then a bit of legal. Apart from that, all other investment is on us. All engineering, all of the construction costs. The system we're proposing is around $3 million of investment that we'd be talking about. That money would be offset by federal incentives that we would get, the state incentives, and then the sale of power to the city over the term of the contract. So that is the power purchase agreement. So I'm on page 5. If you guys have any questions on 1 through 4, please ask. It just talks a bit about Keystone, a bit about some of the founders, me being one of them, our background. And then on page 5 is the power purchase agreement. Sorry also to the people in the back, we didn't put it up on the front, but we'll provide electronic versions and we'll give our cards as well if people want to ask or get a copy. So that's the power purchase agreement. So it's a 25-year contract, a long contract. That's probably the biggest risk, if you will, from the city's perspective. You're entering into a long-term contract. Typically, power contracts are like 3 years, something like that. But that's for dispatchable power that just comes through Ameren, for instance. Ours, we're building a power plant. It's powered by the sun, but it's a power plant for either the sewer treatment plant. We also looked at the police building as well, which we'll talk about later. But we need a longer term contract. We can't actually sell the power to someone else. We have to sell it to where it's connected, right? It's not what they call community solar. It's for that facility.
So just to be really clear on that. So with community solar, you can put solar in a field and you're distributing it throughout the community. In this case, the reason the contract is so long is it's dedicated usage. That's what's net metered. We're behind the meter. So it's just dedicated usage, and that's why there are different plans for like the police station, the wastewater treatment plant, even the facilities building. It's not that much usage, but we can get into the weeds with that later. But just to kind of clarify.
Sure. So if there's no questions on just the basics of power purchase agreement, in the interest of time, I'll keep moving forward. But maybe the last thing I'll say about the power purchase agreement, page 5, is although it is long, there's options to buy it out. And this is in the contract, and it's at appraised value by a certified appraiser. So if at any point power prices went down, we'll show you power prices since 1970. They kind of go like this. They don't go like that because it's kind of part of inflation, and they generally go up. But we've got data that we'll show you on that later. If for some reason they did, so power somehow became free or whatever, you'd be able to buy it at appraised value at year 10, 15, 20, and 25. And, if power's free, the appraised value you would expect would be pretty low. And that's a risk that we take, but sort of softens the blow of it being a 25-year contract. So you're able to buy it out in any of those periods should the town want to. Don't have to. Other thing about the power purchase agreement, the default at the end of the term is we remove it away. I'm not sure about Logan County and their rules. It's usually done at the county level, what decommissioning rules is called, to take it away. You usually have to put a little bit of money aside to take it away. And that's done county by county, and I don't know Logan. But it's typical that we see that, and there's money set aside. And the default option is that it's removed at the end of 25 years. Our interest, it's fully paid off at that point, would be to extend. But the default option, if we can't agree, is that it comes out and there's already money set aside to pay for that, usually with the county. So that's the power purchase agreement. And again, ask questions throughout if you'd like, but it is getting late, so I'll keep going quickly. So the next page, on page 6, is just a high-level layout, and it's not where it needs to be. It's just an idea of the size of system that we're talking about. We're looking at some of the property records, and that looks like private land, from what I can tell, so I don't know. That landlord, we have not spoken to them. I don't think the town owns that land. There's a strip in the property records that the town owns. We could, of course, put it around the sewer treatment plant, but it's more just to give you an idea of the size of system that we're proposing. It doesn't have to be that big. There is economies of scale, for sure.
How many acres would that be?
So 1 megawatt typically, I haven't measured this one, we can get it for you, but typically 1 megawatt is 5 acres.
So it's 10.
Yeah, roughly 10 acres, including the fencing all the way around it. Has to be fenced in. But I haven't measured that particular one right there. It's roughly 5 acres per megawatt. But it doesn't have to be 2 megawatts. 2 megawatts is the most that you can use, and that's 90% of the historical usage of the plant. In Illinois, for some reason, you're allowed to go up to 110% of the historical usage. I don't really know why you would want to take more than you use, because it's not worth a lot when you sell it back to Ameren. In other states, it's typically 90%, and that's what we sized it at, and that gets you to the max anyways. So it could be half this, it could be less. At a certain point, it becomes not interesting for us, honestly, to put the effort in and finance it. We need to go as big as reasonably makes sense and that you're willing to do and that we can find land for. But half of this could work. The city of Freeport, we're just starting construction on, sort of in the northwest of the state, It's about a little over half the size of this. It's 1.2 megawatts versus 2 megawatts that we're showing you here. So we'd have to find where to put it. I think this is private land from what I see on the property records. We could lease it from the farmer, it looks like there's soybeans there. We saw it today. Or we could put it other places. There's some pieces that the town owns that we haven't done a lot of investigation in. There's some places at the plant. I'm not sure what the expansion plans are for the plant. It's more just to give you an idea of, what you could do and where, where we could put it or start to have that conversation happen, if that makes sense. So it doesn't have to be there. It can be where you want it to be and where you'd like it to be. But it's a great place to put solar. We could build it very easily there. If we did put it on that land and it's private land, we'd pay property taxes as well. There's a state assessment that's sort of fixed, and then it'd be the local property tax rate. So if it's on private land, we'd have to pay property taxes. We did the proposal, we assumed we weren't paying property taxes because we're hoping to put it on your land, but we got to figure that out because that's all. If it's higher cost, then that's a variable that's changed on my side, so then the rate needs to go up to compensate that. You'll see it in our agreements as well. Everything we do is on 8% cost of capital. That's how any kind of buyout is figured out as well. So it's really like a bag of money. We have to pay some costs that go over 25 years, like operations and maintenance, property taxes if they're required, and then the electricity rate. And then we have the upfront costs, which is the cost of the system. How we play with that in terms of electricity price and escalator is totally flexible, right? If people wanted it to be flat, that's fine, but it would have to be a higher starting price. The rate we're giving is similar rate. It's the same rate that the other towns are, at least Freeport's getting. The others are a little higher because they're smaller. Yeah.
Do you usually have a dedicated technician to maintain the power plants at your other municipalities?
So you don't have someone on site that just does maintenance of the solar system. What we do is we have an O&M, operations and maintenance provider, typically the electrician, and usually a local or regional electrician that is required to respond in a certain number of hours. And, they're the ones that get the call and have to have, sort of certain response times to deal with any issues. Just so you understand, if this doesn't produce power, we make no money. So we have a vested interest together to ensure that we build a quality system and that it produces really well. Because if it doesn't produce, that's a huge portion of my revenue that is now gone. I can only make money beyond the tax incentives and the state incentives on the energy I produce and deliver to the city. So in terms of the approvals for the system, it's got to be approved by the utility. It's usually goes through the building department, if there's a fire department, it usually goes through those kinds of groups. All the equipment is UL and ANSI rated. This is a normal thing for sewer plants, and we're happy to give references. It's 24/7 online, and it's monitored through a system, and we have a service provider that is watching it, so we know if a string of panels goes down before you would even notice.
So are your panels, are they stationary, are they positional with the sun and its location?
Yeah, so we call it tracking versus fixed, but that's what you're saying. For this project, what we proposed is fixed, and I think that's what we would stick with. Tracking has a lot of advantages in some regards. We're the asset owner in the end, and we don't like moving parts. So while you might lose a little bit on the efficiency, we love the idea of it just stays there and collects the sun, and that's about it. We have to check it up, once a quarter, twice a year, that sort of thing.
Less maintenance.
Yeah. But in general, trackers do make a good sense. Just as an asset owner, we'd rather do a high tilt and have the snow slough off in the winter and not have to worry about moving parts. So, again, trying to move quickly. Please ask any questions if you have them as I'm going. That is for the sewer treatment plant, and again, we can move that, especially if that's on private property for a landowner that we haven't spoken to yet. On the next page, we looked at the police building. So this is, each one of these is 225, so it's sort of either or. I think we
I hate to interrupt you, but can you talk into the mic a little more, just so they can hear you?
a little closer. Sorry. So 225 kilowatts is what the police station needs. So like an order of magnitude smaller than what the sewer treatment plant needs, which kind of makes sense. And each one of these designs is 225 kilowatts. I'm not sure that ground's available. We had conversations after this was made, so that's probably out. The roof could work. The issue you'll see on the numbers later, it's not really economic. The price to do just a 225 kilowatt system, it's too small to make it pay. And so you wouldn't really be saving money on it. Now, if we did it with the sewer treatment plant and the sewer treatment plant was big, we could look to do something to make that economic by sort of blending the two together. But just on its own, we wouldn't really recommend doing the police building with solar, at least where the incentives are right now and the cost of solar right now. And we'll show you that on a later page. You can see it yourselves, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. But we've done it. Similar with the other town building.
So the new facilities building? We did take a look at the new facilities building, which Kevin mentioned, and that was, that one only comes up to a 50 kilowatt system. So that's, or just in general, 250 is kind of our cutoff point. But again, we were thinking maybe, we can blend them, and we can take a look again at the facility. I mean, if we're building a much bigger system, it becomes easier to bundle in, but just on its own, we wouldn't recommend it.
I want to point out that I'm the one that asked them to look at the police station and the street and alley garage, because I wanted to get a comparison of if the city voted to do this, would there be a significant savings at each one? I know the police station uses a significant amount of power, but the new street and alley department does not. So and we didn't have the address and the utility cost at the time when we started this conversation for the street and alley building. So that's why I asked them to separate these out so that we could see what the savings would be for each building and if it was even feasible.
Quick question. What's your transmission distances that you can, do?
Yeah.
I mean, heck, if you put so you said the largest is a 2 megawatt?
In Illinois, yes.
In Illinois?
Yeah.
Can you do 2 twos?
So if you do community solar, you're allowed to do 2 twos, but that doesn't tie to a building, like to a sewer treatment plant. That sells it throughout the Ameren territory. It's a different...
2 twos, I mean, that's why I was asking about transmission then. Can you do like 2 twos out there and then transmit it to the streets and alley, transmit it to, police?
Yeah, unfortunately, not right now. So there's 3 programs under the Future Energy Jobs Act. One is for residential buildings, so you could put it on your house if you want to. Another is what they call large distributed generation, which is for like large users of power, like a sewer plant or a high school or some corporation or something like that. And then the third bucket is called community solar. And that's where you can kind of put whatever the substation can take. That's really what you're looking at, is you want to be near a substation. And then, you can put on one piece of land 2 twos, but on other pieces of land you can do lots of 2s for community solar. The issue with community solar is it doesn't have the sort of rigor of making a customer commit to it. You're basically just, if you can get land and get space on the substation, you can build it. That program's pretty well closed for ever, for a long time. It's we have some of those. It's 12 times oversubscribed. So like, our project, which is near the village of Milan, where we're building the community solar, we're also doing a community solar, we're number 240 on the wait list. So if 239 drop out, then we'll have a project for community solar, but that ship has pretty much sailed. Unless they change it in future years and just say, well, throw everybody out who's invested all this money and we'll start again and do another lottery. There's no ability to do that. You're basically limited to what's left, which is, large power users, which is what we actually like. So
So just a quick point on that too. So the lottery, sorry. So the lottery system, this is a fledgling, early stage solar attempt here in Illinois. And so what happened was they did a lottery, and they split the lottery up for community and distributed generation, which is what we do. So the net metered, dedicated usage versus community, go anywhere. There's 800 applicants still waiting on the list for the lottery for the community solar. It's a little easier to do as well. It's a little harder to do dedicated usage. The good news is that, as Anthony said, all of the blocks got taken, and so they took anything left and they put it into distributed DG. So this type of project. So there's still about 10 or 20 megawatts left, not even.
It's separated ComEd versus Ameren. In Ameren, there's 13 megawatts. So if we did the 2 meg, there's 6 to 7 of those left in the program.
So the good news is there's still an adjustable block program that would fund this, and why we can do this presentation to you. And we're hoping there'll be a 5th block coming up. But there is a little bit of, we don't know what that's going to look like. The good news is for right now, we can get this project through. So how long that's going to be the case is anybody's guess. But it's been popular. But fortunately, this project falls right into that. So if it's something that you're interested in pursuing, we can get this done.
So final thing I'll say in your question is you could put other systems, but you have to run a line and physically connect them into the utility cabinet of the building you're talking about. So to go from that field to the facility building, if it's the one down by the sewer treatment plant, that could be doable. To run a line to the police department, I don't know exactly where that is, but that's not going to be feasible. You're going to have to go through all kinds of roads and all this stuff. So generally, DG is on or right next to the load, if you know what I mean. On the next page, page 8, this is a graph from the Department of Energy, and we're happy to give sources and have you check it out. But this is 2 things. The gray is CPI, Consumer Price Index, since 1970, and the orange is commercial, which is what includes sewer treatment plants in Illinois, power prices. And you can see that they're not quite as straight as the CPI. What happens with power prices is they can be manipulated by governments. They can be forced to be held low, and that's what you saw what happened in around 2005, where they jumped way up, and then they've been kind of going up and down since then. But over long periods of time, 25 years, which is what our contract is, they don't really go down. They go up, and the rate we see in Illinois is over 3% from 1970 to today. And we're happy to share that information with you guys, and you guys can check it at any point. Most people question, because it's part of our economics, right? The starting price and the escalator, right? How much does it go up each year? And those are fungible, right? So as we said before, it's a bag of money that we have to get and to put into the project. And we're happy to do slightly higher rates with lower escalators, that sort of thing. But the total needs to come to that 8% return over the 25 years, including the incentives. Most people believe power prices are flat to increasing, and I think the data proves it out. But we're happy to share this and happy to have other discussions about it. So just a summary of the terms, and then we'll get into some numbers on the 2 agreements, or the 2 locations. So a 2 megawatt plant and a 225 kilowatt system for the police station is what made any kind of sense. Again, no investment or operational responsibility from the town. It's all done by us. It's a 25-year agreement to purchase power at fixed rates. Starts at 4 cents, which is about 10% lower than what you're paying now, but 5 cents at the police station because it's smaller. And that, as you'll see, is not really economic. Mostly from the sewer treatment plant, it's over $800,000 of savings. If you look at historical electricity price increases, based on what you're saving now and then what you should save over the future years. So it's pretty substantial. Starts off smaller and then grows as power prices go up. But you'll see that on the next pages. And then, we propose 2.25 escalator, which is less than the historical average. And then, as we said, you can always buy it out after years 10, 15, 20, and 25, should you want to, but you don't have to. The default option is we'll own it and we'll take it away at the end. If you skip 2 pages, So this is a 300 kilowatt system that we own, just to give you an idea of what it kind of looks like. The one for the sewer plant would be about 7 times bigger than that. We already talked about the acreage, about 5 acres per megawatt, roughly, depending on how you design it. It gives you kind of look and feel. People haven't seen them yet. Not too many around Illinois, but they're coming. You will start to see more of them. And then what most people are interested in, we save the best for last, is the savings. I'll talk to you about this page, and we're happy to answer any questions or go through it in more detail if you'd like to afterwards. So in the bottom right, that electric usage history, you can see actual and estimated. That's actually from the bills for the police station. So we've got your bills, and that is your usage. And that feeds into how much of a system can we do without going over, you can go up to 110, but we only go to a max of 90. So you see that off to the left. It has the total, 90% of usage, how much our system produces, and it's at 90% of that. The top right is the system size that gets you that. So it's the size and the production. Each year it degrades a little bit, 0.5% per year, but not much. So that's factored into these numbers as well. And then it's got your current rate that you're paying, which is 442 from the last bills that we saw. Maybe it's changed, gone up, or sideways, I don't know. And then the rates, and you can see the savings. So it saves a bit on the police station, but not a whole lot. The one that we're more interested in, if you're willing to go to the next page, is the sewer treatment plant. And similar story here in the bottom right. It's actual usage for 9 of the 12 months of the sewer treatment plant. We're only at 80% of the usage rather than 90 we like to go to, just because of the 2 megawatt limit in Illinois. And then again, the pricing versus our pricing initial and then over time. So 442, ours is at 4, which is about a 10% discount, 9.5% discount, as you can see in the top right. And then over time, if utility prices keep going up, then you'll get more money over time. So this table in the middle, you can see some columns. It has your current rate, which should go up based on historical rates.
That's the 3.4% that we're pulling from the Department of Energy, just to put a finer point on it.
And then our rate, and you can see what your rate is each year for the next 25 years. How much is produced, what you would have paid for that energy from Ameren or whomever, if you use a third-party supplier, what our cost is, and then just the delta for that. So you can see the delta per year, and then the cumulative delta that comes up to that almost $900,000 savings over the 25 years.
Mr. Keller, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If I have my information right, for the benefit of the council, whether we choose to entertain this and pursue this or not, my understanding is that there are other companies that offer this type of product. There are Moxie Solar, Touchstone, Geronimo Energy, Green Mountain Energy Company. So obviously we should, in our due diligence, look at other companies as well. But since you're here, why give me your pitch? Why are you better than them?
Well, especially for sewer treatment plants, there's nobody in Illinois who's done, well, by the end of this year, we'll have done more sewer treatment plants than we have, for sure. So we're building 3 right now. We're building City of Freeport, which is very similar size system and scope of system, their sewer treatment plant versus your sewer treatment plant. And then Village of Mine and City of Kelowna. We've also got several signed up for next year, but we just can't get them built before the snow comes this year. Happy to provide references. We also have sewer plants that we've done in New Jersey. We're started more on the East Coast, and things are sort of moving to the middle of the country. So we've been in Illinois 2 years. We've got an Illinois office, Illinois team that is around doing this. But yeah, there is other people that do similar things to what we do. Our buyouts, I think, is good. Not everybody gives the buyouts over time. And I think our price is really good. We don't have a lot of overhead and fluff within our business, not a lot of marketing, and I think our price will beat their price, but yeah.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, there's one of these power plants next to the DNR going into Springfield, and it's across from their sewer treatment plant as well too, right?
Yeah, but I think that's Taraski's that own that. I could be wrong, but I've been told in Springfield, I pass it just like you do. I think Taraski put that there as a corporate solar plant.
It doesn't look very large.
I can tell you they pay for themselves, just in personal experience. Country Bob's in Centralia invested in solar in the property behind their factory in Centralia. Everybody knows Country Bob's sauce, whatever. In speaking with them here just recently, they power their entire plant with solar, and they were expecting a 15-year payback, and it's going to be paid off and pay for itself within 8 years. And then they'll just be selling power back to the I think it's ComEd down there. Again, this was handed to me as a project. I took it on, and I appreciate Mrs. Cavalman handing it to me. This is up my alley with the wind farms and stuff I worked with. I am the one that reached out about the 2 facilities, just to see if there was a savings. Obviously, there's not much here, but I do agree this is something we should look at. $900,000, whether it be over 25 years or not, is nothing to sneeze at. We do own 40 acres of land. I think it's the piece of land just above where you drew this. I'm correct, yeah. The more brown farmland right above where you put that, that's the 40 acres that the city owns. So you're across that green line, that's our property. So it's right there where it would be.
Well, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah, we'd be happy to work with you. The only thing I would say with any investigations you do them quickly. There is 13 megawatts left in what they call Block 4. There is no money for Block 5. We're hoping they'll open a Block 5. The numbers aren't going to get better with future blocks. So talk to as many people as you can, as fast as you can, if this is of interest. And you have to make decisions quickly. One thing I will say, final thing from us, all we ask, if you do want to move forward, is you do whatever process you need to do, whether it's an RFP or town meeting, however you make your decision, you make your decision. And you just sign it's a non-binding letter of intent that just gives us exclusivity for the project for a year to develop it. So we don't want to spend money on engineering and applying for the rebates and for the interconnection until it's been awarded to us. And we think that's fair. So if you did pick us, we're ready to go immediately to work to get the interconnection and then to work on the power purchase agreement if you'd like to. But it's totally up to the town and how you'd want to do this.
Beth, did you have a question?
Yes, excuse me. What was the third city you said that you were in Illinois right now? You said Kelowna and Freeport. What was it?
Yeah, and then the Village of Milan and the Quad Cities area. And we'd be happy to give references from them or from others. Milan is how we actually met you through a conference they were at and they invited us to. It's not built yet in Illinois. There really hasn't been much of anything except under old programs built. We can also give examples on the East Coast of projects that we own. So we're happy to work with you if you'd like to figure this out.
Yes, excuse me. I just wanted to say I was very impressed when I went to the economic development presentation you had back in March, I think it was this year, down in Springfield. That's why I started pursuing.
Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
The other 2 are Georgetown and Abington are going to be built next year. So we're in the process. But they've gone through all of these steps that you guys are at the beginning of. So whatever way we can
Well, those to be clear, Georgetown's about to sign that power purchase agreement. Abington's under signed letter of intent. The others are all in construction. Those we expect to go forward. Usually when people sign a letter of intent with us, they move forward because we do what we say. But those 3 that I mentioned first, Milan, Kelowna, and Freeport are all under construction now. The others will be in construction after the winter's over, basically.
So, and I could have this completely wrong. I've tried to digest everything that's been thrown at us here. But
Sorry about that.
No, it's not you. It's been a long night. So where you're proposing out at the wastewater treatment facility is currently farmland. So I would lean toward the treasurer to to tell us exactly how much revenue we generate from that farmland annually.
Well, it's varied over the years depending on crop prices, but it's been in that $2,000 to $6,000 range.
Per acre?
No,
for overall?
Overall, for that, yeah.
Okay. So then, going into the couple bullet points I wrote. So if I'm reading this correctly, you guys would like to put a facility on city property that would cost no property taxes,
Ideally, yes.
and then you're going to turn around and sell the energy back to the city.
Correct, at a discount.
Okay. So, and then the incentives that you mentioned, plus the 8%, what are those incentives?
So 8% is our cost of capital, how we solve for everything, and we're happy to share our financial models. The incentives are the state incentives. So there's it's called a solar renewable energy credit. It's for every kilowatt hour you produce. They tag it as solar energy, and then Ameren and ComEd have to buy it at a fixed rate over a 10-year contract, basically. So that's the state incentive. And then on the federal level, there's tax incentives. So there's accelerated depreciation and an investment tax credit. Those are only available to taxpayers. The solar renewable energy credit would be available to the town if the town wanted to buy it. Right now, the investment tax credit's at 30% of the system value. Even with the town's cheaper debt, towns can get cheaper debt than I can. They can't beat my rate. So it pretty much always works that it's better to purchase the power out of it than for a town to buy it themselves.
And the size of array that you're proposing, let's say in 10 years we want to buy it out. What's that look like cost-wise?
In 10 years?
If we, in 10 years from now, we wanted to exercise the buyout option.
Depends what happens to power prices, right? So if they go up like we're saying, it would be, I'd have to look at the number, but we're not trying, you don't have to take the option.
I know, I just want to know.
I'll look. There's a certain depreciation value that it's already got, and it's lost like 10 of the 25 useful years. It's valued on a 25-year basis.
Yep.
So, I mean, roughly, that $3 million, it should be, 10/25 of that, roughly, is what it should be, because it's still producing a bit of, degradation, but it's still got a very good useful life. But I have to run the numbers and look at it to give you.
Yeah, if you could do that and then get them back to us through Kevin, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
It's, just to be clear, it's an appraised value, though, at the time, based on the power rates. So it's not like a hard option. It's what we think it would be right now.
Yeah, we won't hold you to it. I just kind of want to know what we're looking at.
Yeah, sure. And again, you don't have to buy it. At the end, you can always, the default option is for us to take it away.
So they don't know the numbers, but you do?
30 million divided by 25 times 10.
Plus the depreciation?
Well, I didn't add in the...
Come on, Kevin.
And the renewable portion is also only for the first 15 years, so you can't guarantee that for the future years, so it should drop off.
Right.
We'd have to run some numbers. And
Okay.
to do that.
Awesome, thank you.
Ballpark figure.
We'll hold you to that one, Kevin.
Jeff?
What other questions?
If we're locked into a rate, what happens when our local electric aggregation company comes in and says, because it's a commodity, and it comes in, they can get it lower than what you're producing it at?
So that is the only gotcha in all of this. It sounds, almost too good to be true. The risk that the town is taking is on that energy price and what's going to happen over time. What we can usually get towns to agree with, and anybody to agree with, is that power prices go up, and we can show the numbers of what they go up, and ours go up less than that. And then there's a savings on the rate, the starting rate. And so, like for instance, on the last page or whatever it was for the sewer plant, you're not even back to your current rate until year 8. So you would expect some savings unless power prices are rapidly going down. I mean, in the U.S., there's tons of natural gas. We're got fracking of shale gas, and that sets the price in the United States. I mean, you can talk to other energy experts, but there's nobody expecting that power prices are going to plummet, because we're going to find more gas. We've got like over 100 years of gas right now that's easily accessible. So the question is, what's the right rate and the amount of savings and the escalator that works for the town? And we're happy to play with those, but that is the kind of only gotcha in this. It's a long-term contract.
Further questions, discussion? Sean?
Do you want me to get in or not? Because they're 100% spot on.
I was going to suggest we get Viola involved in the conversation here.
2 points we want to make sure we understand. He's 100% correct. There's only 13 megs out there. We don't want to wait. I would recommend that we get an RFP out. I agree with you on that as well, so that we can probably create a committee of 2 or 3 people that can look at those proposals and come forward with a recommendation if it is right. Because Jeff is correct. There is some cities that are saying, we're not going to entertain this because we think we can go out on the open market and get 5 cents. And we have seen some cities do that. But those would be the recommendations I would give. And being a renewable energy guy, and I am very much into solar, I would recommend that we do it. The largest user of power in the country is what?
The largest single user, it's the government.
Water and wastewater.
Oh, in terms of affection within the government, sure, yeah.
Water and wastewater is your largest user. So if you can find a way that you can save money on sewer specifically, ultimately that affects rates.
So I can,
Questions for me?
so I can tell you right now, I went back and looked at our municipal aggregation numbers that we passed in December of last year, and that rate was .04825. So the solar rate they're proposing is cheaper than that right now. But this council tends to be very leery of 25-year agreements on much of anything, so Jeff, you're correct. Something to think about.
And that is the biggest issue with our proposal that we have in every town that we speak to.
Well, you're running a business. It makes sense that you would want to see a return on it, right?
Well, and
So-
if we did a 10-year contract, it'd be, over double the price, and that doesn't work, so we have to have a long term.
So what do you think the future looks like for solar 25 years from now? If you had a crystal ball?
Well, solar is getting cheaper every year. Like, costs are dropping every year. We have weird market influences right now, so there's tariffs on the equipment and things like this that are driving the cost up, which is not normal. There's also a lot of good stuff that's available from the feds that is starting to ratchet down. Even at the end of this year, it drops, and in 5 years it's down to 10%, and it'll stay 10% forever. Right now it's at 30%. And then the state as well. We're already in block 4. So what I always say about power projects is if it makes sense, where there's money saved over the long term and there's a decent amount of capital return, this thing should work a lot longer than 25 years. And if it works, do it now, because it may be cheaper, but you may not have the federal, you may not have the state, and it may or may not work depending on these other market forces.
So the thing with the 25 years is the technology improves so drastically. These solar panels will have for 25 years.
Yeah, they're warranted for 25 years.
But the technology will get so much better in another 5 years, let's just say.
Marginally better. The efficiency goes up each year, for sure. But it's like if you have an oil well that's producing oil, you don't say, well, we got more efficient production, so I'm going to shut that well down. You just drill another well, right? So you put another newer, more efficient plant beside the other one. This one works, right? You've got a power price that's locked in and you're saving money. You wouldn't want to mess with that. You may want to do more solar in time. Sure. But you wouldn't take a producing asset that works well and turn it off or try and... People in Europe have tried to do what they call recommissioning, because they way overpaid. Like, we're talking about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. You used to be able to get like 30, 40 cents a kilowatt hour in Germany. And those systems are old and the technology has improved. And so a lot of people have this idea of repowering systems in Germany. You go in and you redo it with all the new technology. It never pays off. So you have a lot of capital equipment. You also have a lot of labor. Like, the biggest thing apart from the panels is the electricians we pay. And so there's a lot of human cost to go and lift stuff and plug it in and all this stuff. So almost never pays to take a producing asset. I've never seen it work to take a producing asset. Sort of upgrade.
Do you ever hear any questions as you're going throughout the country talking about this regarding and I know this is going to sound silly, but regarding like wildlife and the effect that solar has on birds and natural environments and things like that?
For sure, absolutely. So,
because where you're proposing to put this out by wastewater treatment, there's a residential area out there with a lot of wildlife and forest.
and the lakes back there.
Yeah, lake and lakes.
We like sewer treatment plants because usually there's like floodplains that are good for anything else, not necessarily with yours, but in general. Sewer plants are great places where you can't build housing, you can't really do anything with it because of the floods. We can elevate it a bit in the floodplain, be over 100 or 500 year flood, and we can put good land to use that really can't be used. Maybe a bit of sort of marginal crops. So that's our preferred method to put stuff. Like the issue here is we'd be taking, look like soybeans out of production. And I don't know how, productive that land is, but we don't like to do that. Like we're in this for more than just money. We actually care about what we do, and that's why we're doing solar and not something else.
Right.
But it's something that has to be thought of. There's things we can do, and some counties have sort of mandated in Illinois with making solar plants like pollinator friendly. So the type of grasses that you plant will be good for bees. That can help with the areas around it, not necessarily in the plant itself. And then, we hate taking down trees to put up solar. Like it actually pays off from a carbon perspective to cut down trees and put solar, but it's really not what we're in the business of doing. Converting farmland is not ideal either, but if it's near a sewer treatment plant, maybe it's not the most productive farmland, and it could be a good use of land. But land use, to your original question of what happens with solar, these will be questions, because I believe that there will be a lot more solar coming, and there's only so much land that's just bad land out there.
Right. Yep.
Other questions or discussion? Kevin?
So the next step moving forward, obviously it sounds like we need to put together an RFP for a 2 megawatt. I was thinking windmills, so that 2 megawatt solar facility on the 40 acres. I do want to point out that the 40 acres that we're looking at is significantly prone to flooding. It's not the greatest farmland in the world, so it's a perfect location. And it only takes up a little over 5 acres of the 40 we have, so we'd still be leasing out a significant portion of that. But in Steve's point, we would also have extra land if down the line we wanted to add more solar for different things. So just need someone to put together an RFP is what I think we need moving forward and try to get this going as quickly as possible. I did have a long talk with Sean about it when I visited the sewer treatment plant Friday. So Viola's got several plants already running solar, so he's very aware of this situation and obviously is on board with it. So I think we should move forward.
Okay. Okay.
Would you like me to work with Sean on trying, I'm sure Sean's had touch with people putting out RFPs. We could probably copy and paste one, or at least come up with one as a good starting point for us for the specifics for our location.
That'd be a good idea.
Yep.
Yeah, it's perfect. We can get something going, we can get it out on the website. One thing with Illinois, there's only certain companies that can do this because they have to be registered with Ameren, so it narrows that pool down pretty quick. So we can do that. We can create a criteria on how we're going to score. I'm sure Keystone already has some stuff that we could look at as well.
Sure. Yep.
Very good.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Long day for you. We appreciate it.
Can you leave business cards with us as well?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Here's mine.
Perfect. I can do it for you.
I'm going to keep going if you're okay.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Oh, Sam.
Sure, thank you.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, no, I have more.
Yeah, well, we're not gonna do this, ordinance to sell property. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that we talked about it today. Oh, that's more of it. Yeah. That's what, when you thought about it later.
Thank you.
That's why I say it's a risk. It's always a
All right, everybody, we're going to keep on going. So the next item we have is the request to permit the Lincoln Knights of Columbus, number 1250, to collect donations for the annual Intellectual Disability Drive on September 20th, 2019 from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and on September 21st, 2019 from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the corners of Broadway and McLean Streets, Pulaski and McLean Streets, Pulaski and South Kickapoo Streets, and Broadway and North Kickapoo Streets.
Consent
Consent agenda.
Yes.
Okay, we'll place that on the consent agenda. Moving down, we have the resolution for emergency street and sewer repair at Keokuk and Hennepin Streets, estimated cost of $64,812.
I suggest we put that on the voting
I
session.
think Sean wants to.
We probably need to talk, share some information.
Sean, would you like to give some quick insight?
Somebody, yeah, just update quick.
Give us a rundown of what the issue is.
The issue is there's a 24-inch main running down Keokuk that's got a 10-inch tied into it. It's completely broke apart. The ground underneath the street is actually going into the sewer. That's why it's dropping. And it's 11 feet deep, so we're not exactly sure how deep the void is. As more traffic keeps going over it, it's coming down. Afraid that a car will eventually. You've all seen the news stories, right, where the hole opens up? That's why.
So when will they be able to get started on this?
We've got locates called in. They're just waiting on us to give them the word to go.
So, Mayor, did you sign that document already?
It's sitting in my box.
So once you sign it, then you can authorize the administrator to authorize them to do the work.
Yeah, I wanted it to come up before you guys before we officially.
Yes. Yeah, the reason why, Kevin and I came out and talked with Sean and Beth on Friday, and the reason why that we're asking for this resolution to be signed by the mayor, this emergency resolution, is that clearly we have a spending limit of $20,000 for the mayor and the administrator, which this exceeds, due to the amount of time that it will take to process this through normal council meetings and voting meetings is just longer, that this problem sits there and is a risk to the public. And so the declaration of emergency allows the mayor to then authorize the spending of the bill, which is $64,812.
Bypassing our voting. Right. It's just a, do we need to vote?
Because it's
on
an
it?
emergency.
Yeah, normally we would.
Right. But in this
But,
case.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
This is more informational because it's an emergency declaration. I also want to point out that we have the same type of issue in the alley behind the Blue Dog. That repair is under the spending limits, but I just want the council to be aware of this situation so that the administrator and the mayor can authorize Viola to repair those at the same time. The reason being is the equipment would be moved into the city once, and it would save the city around $3,000 in mobilization costs. But that one is under the spending limit, so I just wanted the council to be aware that there's actually two projects, but this one we just wanted you to be aware of because it is an emergency.
Beth, did you have a comment?
Yes, I just was wondering, driving west, which side of the,
It's actually in the middle.
oh,
It's
okay,
in the middle, and then it goes back towards Hennepin.
okay, thank you.
and did we have time, I don't know if Beth has, I know she's been busy, to talk with Chuck about where the funds will come from to pay for this?
That's a very good question. I was looking at the budget. We do have $325,000 in the capital expense sewer construction, and I don't know if you had plans for that to be spent elsewhere. That's line 50-7400-7850.
Yeah, we were actually looking at that to do one of those lining projects, but this is an imminent danger, so we need to move it up. This
Well, I
needs-
understand, but it's still got to come out of somewhere. right?
That's what, I'm agreeing with you, Chuck. We're going to take it out of that fund.
All
So
right.
we can delay that slip lining, some of it?
Correct.
Okay.
Sean, do you want to do an introduction while you're talking?
No, not really.
You don't really have to.
I'll let you introduce yourself.
You have your own microphone.
My name's Anthony Harper, new to first time in Lincoln, Illinois. I can say everybody that I've met so far has been absolutely wonderful. I really thought you were going to start throwing stuff at me when I got here, but no, I'm looking forward to working with all of you guys. Project manager for the wastewater for Veolia, and anything you guys need, give me a call. If you can't understand my accent, shoot me an email. I appreciate it.
I'm not sure what he said, so you'll have to translate.
Okay, so are we good on that item? Any other questions? Sean, did you have any other comments?
No, I just want to make sure everybody understood it was an imminent danger, and we're taking care of it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Sorry, the item number 10, I believe, is not going to be discussed at this time, correct? Okay, so we're going to go to item 11, Comcast 10-year agreement with City of Lincoln, effective September 1st, 2019.
We voted it down.
Well, it's tabled,
So it's just.
sitting there.
I thought we all voted no.
Yeah, they voted.
We voted no,
Voted no.
unanimously.
Okay, so we will just,
There was.
We voted no, and she agreed to keep the contract
Continue
going,
going.
and she would get back to them to see if they would lower it from 10 years, but we voted no.
And she called me today, she would like to have a meeting with the attorney and me and anyone else that wants to come to it.
I would like to be in that one.
Okay.
Please.
is there one other that would like to attend that? Okay, so Kathy Schmidt and Tracy, we'll arrange that with Beth and John. Okay, moving on then, so are we discussing item 12?
12 is dead as well for now.
Okay, so then moving right on to 13, overall update of the progress of the city's portion of Fifth Street Road project and eminent domain letters. Beth?
The letters went out Friday, we have heard from, some of them have come back already, signed, so that's all I've heard. Oh, I did call a few people that we had had verbal agreements with but had not signed yet. I wanted to preface that this was coming to them.
So do you know how many we have left, Beth?
Not at this time. I mean, we
Okay.
had one that they stopped and said they came in and signed on Friday, so I nixed sending that one out.
Okay.
Okay, then, are there, oh, Kathy, do you have a question?
I think she can talk.
My question is, why didn't you say how many are left?
Because they're all in influx. It's all variable, so I don't, we sent out 15 letters, but one gentleman owns several properties, so it just kind of, and then one did not go out, and we've got another one coming in, so it's...
One did not go out?
Right, they signed. They came in and signed, so I might have a better answer for you when I get all these little green things back.
There's several of those that may or already are in negotiations, so I think that's why it's kind of iffy. Any other questions on that? Okay. Drainage concern with City of Lincoln property in the lease with Lincoln YMCA soccer program. Well, Beth? Anyone, both?
Okay, I'll say it real quick. Walt asked me, and he thought it was a good idea too, and I thought it was too, and we had the mayor sign it, was sending the letter out to the individuals, asking them to do something. I don't want to say yet because it's going out today. Tomorrow.
So, I don't know what's going out.
A letter to the football field people, soccer field.
I think you can tell them what it was about.
Just asking them to move the pilings, the millings that have been piled there, thinking that might help some of the drainage in that direction.
Correct me, were they aware that this, I mean, they know
Yes,
that
we
that was
discussed it. We all met out there at the football field that day.
They knew what the issue was, and basically the letter states to either relocate or remove the millings that are piled on the east side of the property to help to try to help mitigate the problem with the landowner.
That's a big pile that was in there.
Questions or further discussion on that?
There is no guarantee. I mean, this is just an attempt.
It's an effort.
Correct.
We don't know what the results are going to be. I think that they will comply, but I don't know what the response will be to what they do.
Well, I think they wanted to move them the day we were out there, so probably have it moved next week.
Okay. Item 15, committee structure. Kevin?
So I'll just make this real quick. I'd like to get some feedback on people. What I would like to see is basically what I'm going to call a committee on request. Like if a topic comes up, and I'm just going to use this one for history purposes. Say Fifth Street Road was starting today. One of the aldermen, the mayor, or the city administrator can request forming a committee. That committee would be formed, and then the people could work on that topic and keep the council informed, much like we did with appropriations, where it's just a request to form a committee so a small group of aldermen can work on a project and keep it moving forward instead of it laying around on a desk or in a timeline and then it come up months or years later and we're all struggling. Obviously, there's been several topics like this that have hit the previous council and now this council that could have been taken care of a very long time ago if the conversation was ongoing instead of just laying around waiting for someone to bring it up and move it forward. That's the kind of committee structure I'm looking at. Sean pointed out a committee that could work on the solar project so that we're not constantly putting it on a cow, where a committee would talk about it and bring something forward. Those are the kind of things I'm interested in. I'm hoping the rest of the council agrees with me. We can work out the logistics later. But on certain topics, I feel that if someone wants to keep something moving forward, we should have the ability to add more than one alderman to it to get a conversation going, and that's where a committee would be formed.
Okay, Kathy Schmidt and Jeff?
I just had a question. It seems like there have already been some committees formed, just by you, I guess. And how is that different? I mean, I'm all for what you're talking about, but like I know there were some citizens put on a committee and it was just done. How is this different?
John?
It just depends on whether or not you're looking to adhere to the Open Meetings Act. If you are forming a committee and the committee consists of 2 aldermen, then obviously there doesn't need to be a public notice for any meetings in association with that. But however, if you're looking to form a committee where there are 3 or more aldermen on there, then obviously there needs to be notice provisions that need to be followed, and essentially agendas that need to be published, not unlike the Liquor Commission. Every time it meets, it publishes its agenda. So essentially, if there's a committee formed that has 3 more aldermen, which I believe Mr. Bateman might be somewhat considering, then yes, then they'll be a bit more formal in regards to meeting times, agendas, and things of that nature.
Real quickly, the reason I think it, and I had this discussion with another alderman, the reason it needs to be more than the 2 allowed is you could have a committee, if you ended up with an even number, that could potentially keep a project or a topic from coming forward to the entire council, where if you have an odd number, the vote is either going to be a straight up yes or no, whether it moves forward to the complete council. If you have side committees and conversations and it ends up just being 2 aldermen, they could talk it to death, and if they both don't like the subject, not ever bring it forward to the council, where if it becomes an odd number, then it's a majority vote whether that subject comes in front of the entire council to be discussed.
Jeff?
I like the fact that it was going to be as needed. only. I don't want to see a structured, police committee, fire committee. You're just diminishing the duties of the rest of the aldermen by having your own meeting. You're adding a layer of bureaucracy, I look at it, because now you're having to repeat everything again. So I not to rehash all this again, but I like the fact that, because we are sort of doing this with the Fifth Street Road project. We did this, and I think it's still ongoing with technology. And it's not just aldermen, we've had department heads sit in on these. And with the sewer situation, we have Viola at the table, and it works. I see that's fine, but not so much of a structure, just as needed. I'd be open to that.
Saying as needed. Right.
Mr. Keller?
Actually, I was just going to say something that Alderman Harnacki said, so I'm fine.
I am sticking with the as needed. I'm just suggesting that we could increase the number of aldermen that sit on that committee. Now, granted, not everybody wants to give up another night of their life, but that committee, if it's more than one alderman, can meet just before the city council meeting. We could take minutes and have an open discussion with the three of us taking minutes, not violating the Open Meetings Act. Still as needed, only when a topic warrants having a committee, but I just suggesting that it be more than just 2 aldermen present.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a follow-up question. So I'm assuming that if it's an Open Meetings Act, there will be, if it's an open meeting, because we'll have more than 2 aldermen, there'll be a recorder that it will be necessary. So who would be responsible for being the recording secretary, and would that person need to be paid like any other meeting?
That's what we would have to work out, whether she needs to be present or she just creates the minutes via recording, which is done consistently in other types of meetings. Then we would have to consider that compensation.
Sorry, follow-up question. Then, because, this is a little bit different, obviously, than what we have been doing with some committees, but not much different. So has it not been working? Some of these as needed committees?
They've been working.
Huh?
We have a technology committee that works.
Yeah, so I guess I still don't see why this is necessary. So I'm not arguing against committees, because I think what you're saying is great. I think there's work that needs to be done, and especially work that needs to be done in such a way that might take some things off the plate of the city administrator and help her out a little bit more, help Mayor out, help our department heads. I guess I'm just wanting to ensure that we're not doing something different to get the same results and make it more complicated than it needs to be.
I just want to say, I think the mayor's been doing a good job about trying to break this up among all the aldermen and looking at their expertise and putting them on these tentative committees we've called for special reasons.
Mr. Conzo, did you have a comment?
I was just, one that concerns me the most, Finance Committee, and that isn't something that you probably need to have that committee meet every month or every 2 weeks or anything like that. But when it would be real helpful to have that is when you do the budget and the appropriations, which are done in succession at the end of, or near the end of the one fiscal year, and then the appropriation following the beginning of the fiscal year. Perhaps might need to meet over the tax levy, although generally, there's a CPI, and then you either accept that or you don't accept it and keep the levy flat, or set it somewhere incrementally in between. And we've generally been able to just do that in the regular council workshop or committee of the whole meeting. But it would help to have a committee in place to work on the budget and the appropriation.
Mr. Welch.
So I would recommend that we continue to move forward using the approach that we have up until now with these committees that are formed on as the topics come up. There's obviously some that are going to stay in place, like Kevin's on sewage now, wastewater treatment, and Sam and I are doing, and I think Kathy has even helped with the Fifth Street Road Project Committee. So I think that's been working quite well, and I think that we've got very good results out of the even technology committee and the things we've been doing, so, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Any other comments on that? All right, announcements. I got 3 quick ones. Probably all know, but 166 years ago today, Abe Lincoln christened the city of Lincoln with watermelons. That's kind of cool. Next week's meeting is Tuesday due to the holiday on Monday, 7 p.m. And I would just like to thank everyone that contributed to an awesome weekend in Lincoln this past weekend. So thank you all. Other announcements? Yes, Beth.
Turner Classic Movies are moving to the Sports Entertainment Package. And Nicktoons, Smithsonian Channel, and the Teen Nick HD, those are going to be available to consumers that subscribe.
I can sleep tonight now.
So did they get some of the channels back that people have been complaining about that were lost?
Did they move them to a higher tier that you pay more for? That's what happened.
Do we have other announcements? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Are we? You have, okay. Motion to adjourn.
You have a second?
Second.
Oh, who made the second? Okay, Tracy made the motion, Jeff seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, meeting is adjourned at 8:58 p.m. Thank you.
An hour ago.
So, remember
What the